Chapter 1218, The Second Strong Hit. Chapter 1218, The Second Strong Hit. Dozens of god warriors were moving like lightning in the dark galaxy and pushing one warrior. The lowest realm of this group was Second Sky of Ethereal God Realm. MIA and Phelps were in this group of chasers with Sloane, Kelda, and the elite warriors of the Dark Shadow clan. They also had some First Sky and Second Sky of incipient God Realm experts from the Big Three families. To kill Shi Yang, they had mobilized their outstanding warriors. Shi Yang chose a direction. His soul consciousness flickered and he headed to Monster Dragon Star. Normally, the brutal dragon tribe and the evil dragon tribe dwelled in this star. Due to the current war, they had gathered at Devil Blood Star. This planet didn't shelter experts currently. It had only vast seas and forests. It was the best place for Shi Yang to account the debts with the god warriors. He didn't worry about the situation on Devil Blood Star. As Shang Chen, Blood Devil, Yang Kai, and the other experts were there with their united spirits, their strength was like a bronze wall. Devil Blood Star wasn't going to be struck apart quickly. Although it was going to be damaged, the planet wouldn't be destroyed quickly. Currently, Sho Zhao's team was on the way. Perhaps they were dealing with god warriors guarding in the outer ring. He had to make more time. When the fleets of Sho Zhao, Wu Feng, and the others arrived, the god clan were going to have terrible headaches. What Shi Yang needed to do was to make more time. Swoosh! A light crossed the sky like a meteor and landed on Monster Dragon Star. This star had many mountains with towering ancient trees. Shi Yang retrieved his aura as soon as he landed. At the same time, the thick forest had covered him. Swish! 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 The god warriors landed on Monster Dragon Star. They released their soul consciousnesses and created a thick mesh net to search around. East, shouted a warrior. Many god warriors dashed away. They could cross 1,000 miles in a blink of an eye as they headed east. However, when they arrived, they found that Shi Yang's aura disappeared. It's south this time. Someone thundered angrily. Right after that, they had to rush one more time. This time, they were outraged. However, Shi Yang was like a slippery eel in Monster Dragon Star. He appeared in one place and then disappeared when the others arrived. His cultivating space power Upanishad. Normal methods won't work with him. MIA gritted her teeth. We must confine his space. Otherwise, we can't aim at him, Phelps roared. They now recognized how exhausting it was to deal with warriors cultivating space power. This sort of warrior could move through space slits and teleport instantly. Even if they were stronger, they couldn't strike their powerful blows at him. They were so reluctant to find them. It would be excellent now if Bello wasn't wounded. True. If Bello was here, that brat would have to die. No doubt. Sigh, too bad that we have only Bello cultivating space power Upanishad at a high level. The god warriors clamored. I hear someone calling for me. All of a sudden, a cold and glum voice arose. A strange light appeared next to Phelps and Sloane. Bello emerged from the halo. Chief. You don't look okay, cried Kelda. I'm all right. Bello waved his hand. His face was dark green with two ash-grey eyes. His skin was strangely dark and green too. It was like an exotic snakeskin that scared people. Bello, can you keep that brat from moving instantly? Sloane frowned and hissed. He and Bello had a good relationship for many years, so he didn't need to consider his wording much. If you can, do it fast. Leave it to me. Bello took the mission. Right after that, his figure faded and he disappeared in people's gazes. Sizzle. 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 The space around them hissed strangely as if someone was using a sharp weapon to tear and cut it into smaller pieces. It felt like the space here was deformed. Shi Yang was moving in a corner of Monster Dragon Star. He smiled coldly, but he looked relaxed. He wasn't worried at all because even though Sloane and Kelda were strong, they weren't any threat to him. If they couldn't lock him, they couldn't do anything. Right from the start, Shi Yang had gained the upper hand. Right now, he was thinking whether to ambush the ones who lagged behind the troop or not. He could seize the chance to behead MIA and Phelps. Right when he was about to move again, his soul had a twitch with the premonition of a fatal danger. Without thinking much, He decided to leave immediately. He knew that some expert was trying to lock him. He felt a little familiar with that aura. Shi Yang's soul consciousness moved. He discolored for the first time. He couldn't teleport. The space nodes he could sense around were all broken. The space here was so unstable that if he was careless, he could shatter it, which would shatter his soul altogether. He lifted his head to look at the sky, his eyes stern. Sizzle. Sizzle. A green air moved in front of him. Slowly, it condensed into the body of the chief of the Dark Shadow clan, Bello. His deep green eyes gazed at Shi Yang as he talked darkly. You can't leave anymore. Shi Yang's face was shocked. I didn't think that you could recover so quickly like this. What kind of evil method did you use? Bello laughed crazily. You don't need to care about which method I used. You should care about yourself. Fighting you in that space crack was my mistake. As you've fused with the flaming origin, I was already in the lower hand in that soul fight with you. I won't repeat the same mistake. So, you have to die today. Oh. From what you've done, you want to deal with me alone, smiled Shi Yang. After Bello had arrived, this space fell under his control. Bello didn't send a soul message or shout to call for the God Clan's attention. Apparently, he didn't want to let the God Clan join this. Shi Yang knew what he had in his mind. After the first battle, he knew that Bello was greedy for the Genesis fruit. He wanted to snatch Shi Yang's co-soul and the fruit since he wanted to give the Dark Shadow clan a whole new world. Bello was the chief of the Dark Shadow clan. Although he had submitted to the God clan, he wasn't really loyal. He wanted to make the Dark Shadow clan strong, and one day, he wanted them to be the overlords of the world like the God clan was right now. To him, Shi Yang's co-soul and the Genesis fruit was his once-in-a-blue-moon opportunity to change the Dark Shadow clan forever. Thus, he kept Sloane, Phelps, MIA, and the God Warriors out of this. He wanted to kill Shi Yang himself to gain the best chance for his clan. The same thing. Give me the co-soul and the Genesis fruit. Then, I can spare your life. Bello smiled darkly. As we both cultivate space power Upanishad, I think you know how brutal space power is. The gap between my realm and your realm is vast. You're no match against me. Yield and I'll spare your life. Well, if you want my soul, come to take it. Shi Yang shook his head. Taking a deep breath, his god body changed. Savage spikes jutted out of his skin. The keratin-like armor shrouded him. Blood chi rose massively. Shi Yang had finished his transformation to use the perfect fighting mode, the immortal demon body. Burn! Shi Yang shouted all of a sudden. A bloodlight shot out with unlimited murderous aura. It generated illusions and overflowed towards Bello. The earth-shaking energy swarmed over Bello. He looked bewildered, as if he was controlled by the negative emotions. He lost control of his mind and his body was pierced through. Swoosh! The bloodlight flashed and then disappeared. It crossed Bello's body. Bello's body divided into two pieces as it disappeared. Shi Yang became stern. Indeed, Bello appeared intact in another direction. He still had a dark and harsh face as he said, "Warriors who cultivate space power aren't afraid of an ambush because no one can act faster than us. We can cross space within a blink of an eye. Unless we're trapped in a special condition, we're almost undying." Shi Yang kept silent. He knew that Bello told the truth. The warriors who cultivated space power Upanishad weren't afraid of stealth attacks. They could tear space to defend or get into space slits to hide instantly. At this moment, the space of Monster Dragonstar was chaotic. Shi Yang couldn't teleport, but Bello could. It was because Bello had stirred up everything, and it was because he had reached second sky of incipient God realm. The higher the realm of the person, the deeper his or her knowledge of the Upanishad became. It's my turn now, Bello gave a faint smile. Sizzle. 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 Massive space slits like the death scythe sparkled with outer space streamers. They led to an unknown, dead area of the universe. A huge space crack like Bello's soul thread opened like a big shell attacking Shi Yang. It attempted to drag Shi Yang into Bello's world. As Bello was at incipient God realm, he had refined the incipient extent. The incipient extent and the real world weren't very different. Once Bello's incipient extent could swallow him, he would have no chance to get rid of it. The incipient extent of the experts who cultivated space power Upanishad was the toughest prison in this world. It was unbreakable. At this moment, Bello was using his incipient extent to devour Shiyang. As long as his incipient extent could shroud Shiyang, he could do anything he wanted to Shiyang. He could extract his soul, take his essence chi, or even filter his memory. Shiyang was placid, but his eyes turned to garnet. He touched the blood vein ring and took out an ancient but exquisite carved blood shield. Shiyang spurted his immortal demon blood on the shield. Abruptly, the shield enlarged massively and bloodily. Shortly after, it covered him. Shiyang could see many mysterious, fine, gory lines moving on the shield like living creatures. The blood cloud mark suddenly glowed magnificently, releasing a terrifying energy fluctuation. Shiyang felt that it was too heavy to hold. Thud. Even Shiyang couldn't hold the blood shield. He dropped it on the ground. It sank as if it had merged with the earth of Monster Dragonstar. The immense energy of Monster Dragonstar was attracted by an invisible vortex. It rapidly flooded the blood shield. Slowly, a vague world emerged on the shield and generated an unlimited evil power. Boom. 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 The space slits that Bello had created were shattered before they could reach Shiyang. Bello gushed out blood. His eyes were blank as his soul was hurt again. Fearfully, he looked at the vague world on the surface of the shield. He gradually appeared as if he had fallen into bedevilment. His green eyes showed his bloodthirsty desire. His mind was devoured. Chapter 12:19. Who's your teacher? Chapter 12:19. Who's your teacher? The surface of the blood sea had so many bloodlines moving. They weaved with each other and created a sketch of a terrifying world that could distort the soul and drag people into the deep abyss of the purgatory. Shiyang held the sword. His soul was vibrating and his eyes were as red as fresh blood. His soul altar was bobbing continuously. The blood mark on the host soul's forehead was vivid and red as if it was resonating with the blood mark on the shield. Shiyang felt like it was a big, throbbing heart. He had a marvelous feeling. It seemed like he had a magical, evil power that could control 7 emotions and 6 desires of every creature. When he held the blood shield, he was controlling their minds and their feelings. He could magnify the evil desires at the bottom of people's hearts unlimitedly. He could make a genuine man become a savage murderer in just a blink of an eye. It was a strange feeling, though. When he looked at Bello, he seemed to see the desires hiding deep inside Bello's heart. He saw his unwillingness when the God clan subdued his clan. He wanted to get rid of this constraint to decide his clan's matters. He seemed to see every secret in Bello's soul. Bello's secrets were now exposed completely. The blood shield had become the Mara in Bello's soul. It had confined Bello in an invisible prison and urged the desires in his soul to torture himself. The more secrets and desires he had, the stronger the Mara could be. It would entangle his soul and cause him to never be able to wiggle out of this confinement. Shiyang smiled all of a sudden. He held a blood shield in one hand and a bloody sword in another hand. These 2 items had fused perfectly with him and they had become part of his flesh body. Through the blood shield, he could see changes in Bello's soul. He understood the desires and what Bello had experienced through his life. Bello's life experiences were like images projected on the blood shield. They crossed Shiyang's mind continuously. Bello's enthusiastic youth, Bello receiving the high position when he was a middle-aged man, Bello connecting to the God clan and becoming Sloane's sworn brother, and his options for the future of the Dark Shadow clan. Shiyang had seen through Bello's entire life. It's really sad, he walked towards Bello and shook his head. Your life has been really sad and you're pitiful. You always think for the welfare of the family and make efforts for the development of your clan. Because of the Dark Shadow clan, you have torn your pride and dignity. You've tried to befriend Sloane of the God clan. You let the Dark Shadow clan become the watchdog of the God clan. You always live for your clan. Have you ever lived for yourself? Throughout your entire life, have you ever had a moment of satisfaction? Bello's face was malignant as if he was in a chaotic mind that the Mara had set for him. He bellowed indignantly, "You think I wanted it?" Crack. Splash. Bellow's god body cracked like china. His blood splashed when his veins stretched until they broke. He had shattered the space and created so many space slits. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Those space cracks had a strong suction force that had sucked all the ancient trees, rocks, and everything in this area into space slits. The strong suction force became fiercer. Shi Yang was trembling as if he was tied up and was being dragged towards those space slits. He knew that those slits connected to Bellow's incipient extent. Once he fell in there, he would never be able to escape. Bellow could squeeze him into any shape he liked. Shi Yang would have no strength to resist. Our Dark Shadow clan is always weak and small. If we want to survive, we have to depend on the strong ones. The God clan is the overlord of this world. As the chief of the Dark Shadow clan, I don't think I was wrong to choose a big mountain to lean on. My choice wasn't wrong and it will never be wrong. I've brought the Dark Shadow clan a new life. I brought them many life stars. I wasn't wrong. Bellow faced the sky and roared to vent out his unwillingness to his destiny. Our Dark Shadow clan isn't one of the 4 great creatures. I could only do that. But it's different now. If I kill you and get the Genesis fruit, I can bring the Dark Shadow clan to a whole new world. Bellow ripped his chest apart. The green veins broke like strings. It seemed like he had triggered the magical power of space, which had made the space collapse massively. Monster Dragon Star was shaking. The mountains collapsed. Parts of the ocean disappeared. Dash! What is Bellow doing over there? It's earth shaking in that area. Bellow did that. He's fighting Shi Yang. He didn't send us any message. Something is wrong. The god warriors from different areas of Monster Dragon Star wore stern faces while they looked at the place with a big commotion. They frowned and discussed. Sloane's eyes were cold and harsh. After a while, he turned to Kelda. Do you know what Bellow wants to do? Kelda was tense. He bowed and then said, he's trying to kill that immortal demon brat. That guy is cultivating space power Upanishad too. He has confined the space and shattered it. In that case, anybody who gets in there will be endangered. Perhaps it is because we didn't cultivate this power and he didn't want us to get hurt, so he didn't tell us. He stooped as his soul was filled with fear. He knew that Sloane was naturally oversuspicious. If Sloane had a bad review of the Dark Shadow clan, it would be a disaster for their clan. Anyway, the Dark Shadow clan was a vassal of the God clan. They had to observe the God clan's complexions to survive. If you're worried about him, I'm going there. Is that okay? Kelda looked at him, his eyes sincere and obedient. Sloane gazed at him for a while. He nodded with satisfaction, chuckled, and then waved his hand. No need. I believe in Bellow. I know that he won't fail me. As he said that, the other god warriors didn't have anything to clamor. They stopped questioning Bellow's deeds. Kelda exhaled in relief. Crack, crack, crack. The void exploded like bamboo culms. Bellow stood under the space slits. His soul consciousness was too vague to be captured. Shi Yang looked at Bellow as if he was looking at an air mass. He couldn't locate the chief's body. It was because the space nodes were all shattered and Bellow's location was specific. It gave him advantages. Shi Yang couldn't target Bellow and attack him. Also, the mind control that the blood shield had applied on Bellow vanished shortly after. Bellow recovered his sound mind. He was so wary of the blood shield. He said as he was still frightened, no wonder why it's the top treasure of the bloodthirsty force. It's really magical. The rumors weren't wrong. The top treasures of the bloodthirsty force could create a unique world for each with many magical features. I'm convinced today. He suddenly laughed excitedly. Thinking that the top treasure of the bloodthirsty force is about to fall into my hand makes me so excited. Kid, are you ready to die? I'm ready, Shi Yang grinned. He gently knocked the blood sword's handle on the blood shield. The strange metal clinking sounded. The sound waves came like a surging sea or 10,000 warriors fighting. It was so thrilling to the mind. Clink, clang. The sounds of the metal colliding had immeasurable evil power as if it was pounding on people's hearts. The blood shield connected to Bellow for the second time. At that moment, Shi Yang saw Bellow's experiences once again. He saw a secret that Bello had hidden deep in his heart. A dim shadow in a sealed cave was floating in front of Bello and teaching him something. That shadow could pierce through the void, space, or the sea territory, moving between the space slits like a swimming fish. It was the biggest secret that Bello was hiding. That dark shadow was explaining to Bello the mysteries and magical features of space power Upanishad using a special training method. He was Bello's primary teacher who had guided Bello to the mysterious shrine of the space power Upanishad. He had imprinted the Upanishad into Bello's brain, affected him, and promoted him for years so he could become the chief of the Dark Shadow clan. This piece of hazy, hidden memory seemed to be so far behind in his life that Bello had almost forgotten it. Shi Yang got this wisp of memory from the blood shield, which was projected from deep inside his brain. That dark shadow was vague, but Shi Yang could see the blood cloud mark on his forehead. It turned out that the man was a member of the bloodthirsty force. The evil sounds disappeared. Shi Yang was shaken. He then looked at Bello with a strange face. "Who's your teacher?" "Teacher?" Bello was bewildered and then shook his head. "I don't have a teacher. I learned the power Upanishad myself. It's all from my efforts." He laughed sinisterly. "So, you know that you are about to die in my hands, so you want to talk about something else to buy yourself more time?" Shi Yang frowned and asked, "Did you used to have a coma or a dream that after you woke up, you figured out that you had knowledge of the space power Upanishad? After that, you started to practice the power, right?" He remembered what had happened to Hassan. Hassan used to be a wimpy kid. After a coma, he had fused with the soul fixation of Xian Shan, which had transformed him completely and made him the new prodigy of the God clan. However, Hassan didn't know what had happened to him. "Kid, do you know the fate power Upanishad?" Bello snorted impatiently. "It's true. That year when I was cultivating in the secret domain of the Dark Shadow clan, I fell into bedevilment, so I had a coma. I had a dream that a deity had taught me space power Upanishad. When I woke up, I found that my understanding of the power was deep enough. After that difficult cultivating period, I finally defined my path of cultivating. Eventually, I worked my way up and earned the achievements that I have today." After that, Bello didn't talk more. He began to dash through the space slits. His soul consciousness locked Shi Yang, urging the layers of space energy and attempting to confine Shi Yang. Shi Yang stood at his spot. His face became so odd. He stared at Bello and didn't move an inch. He finally believed in what Shang Chen had told him. No force could compare to the foundation of the bloodthirsty force. The leader that understood the mind control power with countless appearances had prepared many things for the bloodthirsty force. Apparently, Bello, the chief of the Dark Shadow clan, was one of the surprises he had prepared. If the blood shield hadn't projected Bello's whole life experiences and the secrets he had hidden deep in his heart, Shi Yang could have never known that Bello was the disciple of that guy. Even Bello had thought that it was just a dream. Bello knew the secret that he himself was deceived from. No wonder why the God clan hadn't doubted anything. A terrifying fella. Thinking about his deeds, Shi Yang felt shivers running down his spine. This kind of strategic conspiracy made him sincerely admire the one who planned this. Chapter 1220. Don't wanna be a dog anymore. Chapter 1220. Don't wanna be a dog anymore. Bello's eyes were resolute. No matter what Shi Yang said, he appeared indifferent. The bright space slits appeared like magical snakes swimming. Slowly, they packed the place and created a spider net. They affected the space around them and created the force that bound Shi Yang. Shi Yang held a blood sword and a blood shield, his face placid and nonchalant. He looked at Bello. He looked like he didn't know that a disaster was coming. "Your death will bring the Dark Shadow clan a new life. I will turn the Dark Shadow clan to a whole new page. Rest well," smiled Bello. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The lines wiggled, confining the space and shrinking it. The air pressed down on Shi Yang's body. He was restricted. His soul consciousness was stagnant. His soul fell into the dark abyss and he couldn't extend it to sense the surroundings. However, he stood still. A strange light shot out from deep in his eyes. That halo was dark as if it was mocking Bello's efforts. It was telling Bello that his effort was just in vain. The strange light emerged in Shi Yang's eyes had alarmed Bello. Clang! Clang! All of a sudden, the blood sword touched the blood shield and echoed clear metal clinking. The blood patterns on the shield created a faint world. All of a sudden, they became lively, forming a red eye and watching Bello. Bello's brain was shocked like the thunder. A wisp of memory had drawn out and turned into a magical drawing in his sea of consciousness. There was a dark cave in the Dark Shadow Clan's mysterious domain. Bello was still a tired young man who was staring blankly at the dark, stone wall. A faint light like a firefly appeared in the dim-lit cave. It slowly enlarged to a dark shadow that couldn't be recognized. It had a faint energy fluctuation as if it was explaining something to Bello. Young Bello lifted his face to listen to the shadow, his face baffled as if he was in a dream. His body slowly glowed in a yellow halo. The halo covered his entire body and twisted the void. His soul imitated the halo to fluctuate, his eyes earnest and understanding. The shadow flickered like a candlelight. The magical soul fluctuations slowly explained to young Bello the mysteries of the power Upanishad. Then, the image flashed and the shadow faded away. However, when it vanished, it had left the blood cloud mark. Bello stood in the intersection of the space slits. He looked bewildered, just like when he had just learned the power of space in the past. Shi Yang studied him quietly. After a while, Bello woke up. He gathered himself together, his face uncertain. "You get it." Shi Yang chuckled. "Understood." Bello darkened his face. "Just continue to fulfill your role as chief of the Dark Shadow Clan. When I need you, I will contact you. If the God Clan has big commotions, you have to notify me at any cost." Shi Yang promised him with a solemn countenance. "What the God Clan can give you, I can give you in the near future. I can give you even more than that. I have the Genesis fruit. The God Clan will definitely decline. Don't worry. Be my pawn. I won't mistreat you." Afterward, Shi Yang directly flew away as he wanted to escape quickly. Boom. 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 Shortly after, the void exploded. The space slits that Bello had created turned into sharp, shining blades. The sharp sabers were like fireworks with torrential energy that slashed Shi Yang's body. Bello's eyes were like the tip of a blade. He lowered his voice. "What if I can understand? I've been struggling in this life for many years to survive between the crowd of experts. I couldn't eat well or sleep well. I have never had a moment of peace in my life. I don't want to continue this life anymore." The shining blades like laser knives slashed horizontally and vertically. Everywhere they passed, the void sizzled and exploded, giving way to countless banners of outer space streamers. They created a downpour of light as magnificent as meteors from the galaxy. "So, do you know you will die?" Shi Yang turned around and sighed. "I've been like a dog for my whole life. I don't want to be a dog anymore. I will snatch the Genesis fruit to become a master, or I will die. That's all." Bello's face had never been so resolute. "If you don't want to be a dog, you can only die," Shi Yang sighed in regret. The eye on the shield suddenly turned into a blood cloud mark. It flew out and entered Bello's glabella despite the distance between them. Bello's soul altar had a resonating energy wave. A wisp of soul emerged and shrouded Bello's soul. That dark soul asked something. However, Bello's soul smiled and shook his head resolutely. The dark soul didn't talk more. He took the blood cloud mark that had just arrived and shoved it into Bello's soul. As soon as the mark was integrated, Bello's soul dissolved quickly. After several breaths, Bello's soul seal had turned into nothingness. It vanished completely. His soul altar cracked and slowly fragmented. The dark show flashed and then disappeared. It didn't talk to Shi Yang, not even a sentence. Shi Yang was surprised. He contemplated for a while and then touched his forehead. Shi Yang's mysterious soul altar spun and emerged above his head. The black hole of the devouring power Upanishad flew out and drew Bello's soul altar, which was collapsing. Bello's soul altar then turned into a white light and entered the black hole. Bello's body withered like an ancient tree that dried up quickly. It was now a skeleton without a beam of energy. Thud. His body fell on the ground and broke like glass. The dust of his remains went away with the wind. His soul and body completely dissolved. Bello's image in this world had been erased. He would never have a chance to resurrect. The dust went with the wind, but a wisp of unwillingness whispered like a light sob until it had become a withering wind. Shi Yang shook his head and sighed with a complicated countenance. He muttered to himself, why did he do that? The chief who used soul control power of the bloodthirsty force had left a restriction in Bello's soul when he introduced him to the power of space. He had installed a bomb in Bello's soul. From thousands of years ago, this man had planned everything. Perhaps it was a long-term conspiracy when Bello had taken each step to become the chief of the Dark Shadow clan and made his clan dependent on the ascot of the God clan. Everything was for this moment. Taking today's event as an example, if it wasn't Bello but another one fighting against Shi Yang, even if he wouldn't die, he would have to pay a bloody price. That expert had estimated everything. He had plotted many things. Bello was just a pawn of his. Unfortunately, Bello just knew everything right before his death. He had struggled to survive for his whole life. For the welfare of the Dark Shadow clan, he had to depend on a strong clan. All of a sudden, he got to know that his rise and all of his experiences were manipulated. He suddenly understood that becoming the chief of the Dark Shadow clan wasn't because of his talents. Someone had planned it beforehand. Ultimately, he denied continually being enslaved. He wanted to die to get rid of the heartless arrangement of his fate. Shi Yang was absorbed in Bello's thoughts. Perhaps you're right. Shi Yang watched the space resume its normal status as he mumbled, his face dark. All of a sudden, his soul sent out a vibe. The Tear of Power Upanishad had just received something magical, which astounded him. He concentrated on sensing. The Devouring Power Upanishad had swallowed Bello's soul altar. As Bello was at second sky of incipient God realm and had cultivated Space Power Upanishad, all of his attainment of Space Power Upanishad had turned into a wisp of memory that immersed in Shi Yang's Tear of Power Upanishad. It quickly merged with Shi Yang's Space Power Upanishad. Shi Yang gawked and dropped his jaw in awe. Until now, he had always thought that Devouring Power Upanishad was to just take in the energy and generate soul energy to nurture the soul altar. In fact, after using this power many times, Shi Yang had found only this function. But today, it was different. It turned out that Devouring Power Upanishad could be used to train the Powers Upanishad and turn them into a wisp of memory to directly merge to his Power Upanishad. The reason why it hadn't happened before was that he had swallowed the soul altar that didn't have the same Power Upanishad with his. Since Bello had cultivated the same Space Power Upanishad, the Devouring Power could turn his attainment into a wisp of memory so Shi Yang could learn directly. This Power Upanishad is terrific. Shi Yang was thrilled. After he had fused with the essence of Bello's Power Upanishad, he was astounded. Now, he knew how terrifying the power of the Bloodthirsty Master was. He finally knew why the Bloodthirsty Master could arrogantly stand in this world for so many years and make the four great races submit to him. At a corner of Monster Dragonstar, Sloane, Kelder, Phelps, MIA, and some incipient God Realm warriors of the God Clan were watching in the same direction, their faces stern. Gradually, they relaxed. Kelder looked at that area and stooped his head. The space energy has calmed down. I guess the battle is over. My chief will come here soon. Sloane smiled, nodded, and comforted the others. I've been friend with Bello for many years. I know he won't let us down. We just have to wait here. The warriors of the Ascot family and even incipient God Realm experts of the Fernandez family and the Bai family were here. To kill Shi Yang, the three forces had sent their elite warriors. After they murdered Shi Yang, the Elder Committee was going to open the Sky Bridge for them. As the incipient God Realm experts of the Fernandez family and the Bai family saw how confident Sloane was, they didn't say more. They sat down cross-legged and waited indifferently. Time ticked away. Bello hadn't shown up yet. Even Sloane had to wear a cold and dark face. Kelder knew he should do something. He stood up and then said, I'm going there to check. He rode the butterfly war chariot of the Dark Shadow clan and flew away. He disappeared from their sight shortly after. Uncle, would something wrong happen to Bello? Phelps muttered. People's eyes twitched. You thought a lot, Sloane smiled lovingly to his nephew. Bello is at second sky of incipient god realm and he has space power Upanishad. There is no need to mention that, kid. Even if your father attacks Bello, he can only defeat him. He can't kill Bello. It's almost impossible to kill Bello. The Fernandez family's warriors and the Bai family's warriors nodded as they knew that Sloane was right. The experts who cultivated space power Upanishad were the hardest opponents to kill in this world. Everybody knew this. After half an hour, the butterfly war chariot of Kelda returned. He looked terrified when he shouted hoarsely, "Our chief is dead." Chapter 1221, Bloody Fight. Chapter 1221, Bloody Fight. Bello was dead. Shi Yang's black hole had swallowed his soul altar. The traces of his life in this world were utterly gone. When the space energy fluctuation calmed down, Shi Yang had left the place. He flew out of Monster Dragon Star and headed to the other areas around Devil Blood Star. His 10 fingers continuously shot out beautiful beams of light as he was weaving many hand seals to build space doors to teleport constantly. The space doors were like a series of light rings. Whenever he crossed one ring, he could move billions of miles. He had soon left Monster Dragon Star behind. Shi Yang was so thrilled. Bello had cultivated space power Upanishad to second sky of incipient god realm. He had a deep knowledge of space power. Today, after he had merged many magical abilities of space power to his tier of power Upanishad, he was like a fish released to a vast ocean. He could tear space slits or build the light doors easily. If there were many space nodes around, he could even open many light doors at the same time and get through them like a shuttle. He couldn't do this before. The black hole was still melting Bello's soul altar. More wisps of memory related to the mysteries and abilities of space power Upanishad continued to merge into Shi Yang's tier of power Upanishad. His understanding of space power Upanishad was advancing every second. While he was creating light doors, he applied the new techniques that flashed in his head. Flashes of recognition appeared and gave him more abilities. Bello's soul altar had given him a lot of benefits. If he had time to slowly comprehend, his understanding of space power Upanishad would reach Bello's level. If he was more flexible, he could understand more and even surpass Bello. Before today, Shi Yang's tier of power Upanishad had 3 powers including space, star, and death and life. His star power Upanishad had leaped up when he was on Desolate and got the power of the precursor from the God clan together with that magical fruit. Now, his understanding of star power Upanishad had reached an unpredictable, mysterious level. Today, he got the attainment of Bello's space power Upanishad. Until now, Shi Yang's space power Upanishad and star power Upanishad had surpassed his current realm. As long as he could have a breakthrough on his death and life power Upanishad and his soul altar remained clean, he could reach incipient god realm within a short time. He would enter a whole new world. Swoosh! Shi Yang appeared on a conical asteroid. He watched his surroundings and then released his soul consciousness. The soul consciousness with space energy had crossed billions of miles and quietly entered Devil Blood Star. Images started to appear in his brain. Several thousand battleships as imposing as a mountain anchored in the sea of clouds above Devil Blood Star. The god warriors rode the war chariots, moving and roaring above the mountains and lakes to fight the forces on Devil Blood Star. The god warriors wore bright silver armor and held sharp, divine weapons in their hands. While fighting, they understood each other tacitly. Each troop could create extremely powerful attacks. Quite the contrary, the warriors of the forces on Devil Blood Star didn't know how to cooperate with each other to promote their powers Upanishads. They didn't have any significant team strategies. The result was obvious. The God Clan had the upper hand. Slowly, they created a pushing and crushing momentum. Battleships fired from the clouds. The flames fell from the sky like flaming meteors. They plowed the big holes on Devil Blood Star's surface. Many battleships exploded while engaging in the battle. Their fragments fell from the sky like meteors, which then destroyed the structures on the planet. The thunderclaps shook the sky. The lightning bolts shot like rainbows. Tornadoes swept over the land like massive knives cutting the star. Devil Blood Star's doomsday was coming. Fick, ran Non, and Baikan stood arrogantly in the layers of the clouds. They attacked Blood Devil, Yang Kai, and Shang Chen respectively. They were using the power Upanishad to attack and defend. When their earth-shaking energies impacted, the mountains collapsed and the river boiled up. Many mountain ranges were leveled. The battleships hit each other. Incipient God Realm experts were engaged in close combat. Their energy impact had shattered and ruined the entire Devil Blood Star. The planet that had survived the God Clan's God punishment was on the edge of collapsing in this bloody battle. It was going to explode or fragment into many pieces of asteroids at any minute. Shi Yang retrieved his soul consciousness, his face dark. At this moment, Blood Devil, Shang Chen, Yang Kai, and all the warriors fighting for Devil Bloodstar were pretty similar to Bello. They could have chosen to follow the God Clan, which would have saved them from this bloody battle and death. As long as they agreed to wear the God Clan's shackles on their necks, they could continue to live their life well. But they didn't do that. They would rather die on the battlefield or explode their soul altars than surrender. Actually, their choice and Bello's choice were similar. If Bello had nodded and agreed with the Shadow's condition, he would have been still alive. He could have continued to be the chief of the Dark Shadow Clan. If the bloodthirsty force eventually controlled this world one more time, the Dark Shadow Clan would have ended up being more prosperous than they were now. But he didn't agree. It was because he could see that his fate would change a bit. He would still be enslaved. He would just have another master. Eventually, he chose death. Just like him, the warriors on Devil Bloodstar at this moment were burning their lives to fight. They weren't afraid. They were unwilling and unyielding. Shi Yang was touched. He was touched because of the choice that others had made in the line between life and death. He knew that many people were dead, but their spirits were immortal. Meanwhile, someone was living, but he wasn't different from a dead person. Suddenly, he had a new conception of life and death. He opened a space slit. After walking through the light ring, he felt like he had stepped through the line between life and death. He appeared directly on Devil Bloodstar in the middle of a battle between Fick, Baikan, Rano, and Blood Devil, Yang Kai, and Shang Chen. He stood on a mountain peak and lifted his head to watch Fick, Baikan, and Rano. There was no fear or worry in his eyes. His face was strangely placid. P2E. He spurted out blood. Those drops of blood were fulgent like rubies, falling on the gory eyes on the sword. The brutal energy from the sword soared up into the sky. A bloodlight column shot directly into the galaxy and reached some dark place far away, which was a mysterious area in this cosmos. Shi Yang was still in his immortal demon body form. His body withered quickly. His eyes became blood red. At the same time, the terrifying energy on his body burst out like water overflowing a broken dam that poured into the blood sword. The eyes on the sword opened one by one. The blood chi from the eyes diffused and created a giant Demogon phantom, which held the sky and stepped on the ground. The blood phantom faced the sky and roared inaudibly. Its hands crazily pulled and tore. The god warriors who were coldly slaughtering the others were like cheap china items under this attack. They broke terribly. Shi Yang inhaled deeply and then bellowed. Blood trickled down from the corners of his eyes. He shot up into the clouds crazily like a streak of bloodlight. The god warriors screeched and screamed wherever the bloodlight swept through. They were beheaded or halved. Their blood splashed and turned into a thick blood mist. The sky looked like it had a blood rain. Each of the drops carried endlessly brutal and bloodthirsty desires. They carried Shi Yang's comprehension of life and death. The blood rain was showering. Shi Yang was now insane as he turned into a pure killing machine. A blood phantom of the Demogon flew together with a bloodlight through the sea of cloud above Devil Bloodstar and took the god warriors' lives. Fick, Baikan, and Rano grimaced. They thundered and shouted to ask the incipient God Realm experts of their teams to stop that lethal attack. However, the bloodlight that Shi Yang had transformed was untraceable. It seemed to move through space slits continuously. His soul consciousness couldn't be locked. The incipient God Realm experts could only stare at him killing their warriors. When they were ready to strike with their attacks, Shi Yang had been thousands of miles away for a long time. The spectacularly powerful features of the experts cultivating space power Upanishad were showcased now. They couldn't do anything. Shi Yang had killed most of the warriors who were at ethereal god realm or a lower realm. He succeeded in just a blink of an eye. When the others recognized that things were going wrong, a bloodlight had already brushed across them and sliced their bodies apart, dragging their soul altars into a chaotic space basin. He didn't want to waste his energy with incipient god realm. He struck the magical formation of the god clan directly. He had shot at the key persons of the god clan's troops instantly, which disabled the close cooperation of different powers Upanishads between those warriors. The god clan's troops couldn't perform at their best anymore. He was slaying ethereal god realm experts of the god clan like a meat-grinding machine. The bloodlight swept over and created a blood rain. Gradually, a blood sea emerged above Devil Bloodstar. It wiggled as if it was a living thing that surged like tides quietly swarming toward the god clan's battleships. "Get away from that blood sea, now!" Fick discolored in fear. He couldn't help but shout hoarsely. He knew what that blood sea was. He knew what kind of changes that blood sea could arise. He was so agitated. Unfortunately, the blood sea was moving fast. When he shouted, the blood sea had reached dozens of the god clan's battleships. A crazily terminating ambience slowly diffused and multiplied on those battleships. All of a sudden, the god clansmen staying on those battleships became insane. They started to attack their own fellow people. The general situation of this battle hadn't changed yet. But on a small scale, the god clan had to bear a significant loss. While the battle was at the most furious moment, the noises of the battleship engine arose from a far distance. Many battleships as big as immemorial beasts slowly pierced through the layers of clouds. Those battleships were strange and bizarre, carrying many experts of different clans with intimidating auras. They were Sho Zhao's team, reinforcements coming from other star areas. Their appearances meant that the god clan's disaster had arrived. "Rano, ask the Elder Committee to open the sky bridge," Fick couldn't help but shout. He didn't even care about the big flaming rocks that Yang Kai was striking toward him. He raised a gold dragon spear and thrusted towards the bloodlight that was constantly changing its location. The gold dragon spear turned into a gold dragon. The thick dragon scales had an extremely sharp metal aura. The gold dragon spurted out so many gold balls. Billions of gold balls like small hedgehogs filled the air. When the gold hedgehogs filled the air, the gold dragon dissolved little by little as if it had turned into billions of small hedgehogs. Fick's body had turned into a gold light beam. He appeared in the middle of the billions of hedgehogs, his two hands making magical hand seals. Billions of fist-sized, gold hedgehogs began to spin. The cracking noise arose. The army of gold hedgehogs crushed everything in their ways and swarmed towards Shi Yang's bloodlight. "Oh!" Shi Yang cried and turned back to his human form inside the bloodlight. He found that the space where he was standing had been utterly destroyed and was falling apart. His space power Upanishad had no place to perform. It was disabled quickly. Shi Yang couldn't move freely anymore. Fick was almost in front of Shi Yang. He had third sky of ethereal god realm and was one of the leaders of the god clan. He was well known everywhere in this universe. Chapter 1222, End of the Legend. Chapter 1222, End of the Legend. Billions of spiky gold balls rolled around and cracked the space. A gold world emerged and was slowly placed in the real world. Shi Yang was locked in this sparkling gold world. Instantly, he had lost the connection to the outside world. His space power Upanishad had no room to perform. Shi Yang couldn't promote the magical ability anymore. Fick's eyes were gold like the dazzling sun. The gold halos emerged behind his head, expanding into a gold world where a gold dragon spear was planted. That gold dragon spear didn't matter. It was the power of the incipient extent. It was the essence of the sharp metal energy, which stored Fick's attainment of metal power Upanishad that he developed for his entire life. The 3-meter-long gold dragon spear flew across the sky so powerfully that it could directly tear the sky and pierce through anything. Swoosh! The dragon spear was like a gold bolt of lightning that pierced through Shi Yang's chest. The sharp metal energy brutally destroyed his veins and body. Just like a demonic flower withering, Shi Yang's body shrank and dried bizarrely. The power of his entire body drifted away rapidly. His soul altar shook continuously as if it was about to collapse. Your real realm is just ethereal God realm. You haven't created the incipient extent and you dare to brag and swagger everywhere. You don't want to live. Fick squinted. The long gold dragons shot out from his eyes as he roared. Those long dragons looked like they were made of pure gold. Each of the 99 dragons was several thousand meters long. They spurted gold smoke and fire, attacking Shi Yang. At that moment, Shi Yang was covered in the gold smoke and flames. Amazingly, that block of smokes and flame had many tiny saws that then intruded Shi Yang's soul altar and began to cut and tear his soul altar. His god body and soul were exhausted, his powers Upanishad restrained. In front of Fick, Shi Yang felt dispirited as if he was utterly subdued. He couldn't use his force. From ethereal god realm to incipient god realm, there was a gap that people couldn't explain. He was relentless this time. Now, he recognized that the higher realm could subdue his powers. Even though he had fused with the Genesis fruit, it couldn't shorten the gap between their realms. The gold dragon spear had pierced through Shi Yang's chest and drained his blood chi rapidly. At the same time, 99 long dragons were burning him. The host soul on the soul altar was shaken and even the black hole of his devouring power Upanishad was sawed by the mysterious gold saws. Shi Yang's host soul was wiggling as if it wanted to leave his soul altar. Shi Yang was petrified. Fick was worthy his title of the chief of the Ascot family. He wasn't like Bello. He knew how to deal with Shi Yang. After extracting your power Upanishad and your host soul from the soul altar, I can use the secret technique to erase your soul consciousness and memories. Your host soul will become my son's co-soul. My son will become the new owner of the Genesis fruit. As Fick was wholeheartedly concentrating, sweat started to bead on his forehead. Shi Yang's consciousness became hazy. He was aghast when Fick started to squeeze his soul to erase his memory. No. His soul was screaming and crying unwillingly, his soul altar shaking hard. A beautiful light sparkled and radiantly illuminating his soul and sea of consciousness. Shi Yang's soul altar became crystal clear. A brilliant, galaxy-like ethereal extent emerged, covered Shi Yang's body and soul altar. The suns and moons in there enlarged beautifully. As his power Upanishad changed, they emitted marvelous holy lights. These beams of light pierced through the layers of thick mist, shining on the world Fick had built. Fick's gold world couldn't stand the piercing lights, shattering at a speed naked eyes could observe. Collapsing with Fick's incipient extent was his absolute confidence, the great world purifying light. He was aghast and he couldn't hold his shriek. He felt like he had just seen ghosts in daylight. He was so baffled that he stood blankly. This power Upanishad was what a precursor of the God clan had learned. It was the secret that the God clan had never told anybody. Many years ago, only the warriors from the first family of the God clan could study this power Upanishad. People who could cultivate this power Upanishad and create the great world purifying light could be counted by using the fingers of someone's hands. Only the old generation of the Bradley family in the Elder Committee could use this ability. Even Haig hadn't learned it yet. How could this man use the untold ability of the God clan? Fick discolored in fright. His gold world shattered. The gold dragon spear he had created by the energy of the incipient extent had turned into a gold light that disappeared into his soul. Countless spiky gold balls and long dragons that were fuming smoke and flames had their energy reduced together with the collapsed incipient extent. After the great world purifying light emerged, it had subdued Fick's power Upanishad. Shi Yang had recovered his mind quickly. At first glance, he saw fear on Fick's face. He saw that the suns, the moons, and the stars were like light curtains attached to the dome of the sky. Gritting his teeth, he used the chest cavity of the immortal demon warrior to make a symbol. That symbol wiggled for a while and then turned into a massive bloody mouth. Turning around to look at Fick, Shi Yang got into the massive bloody mouth immediately. The bloody mouth closed right after that. The crushed void now generated chaotic space currents with terrifying tornadoes that carried the soul-exterminating dust. Fick paled when he saw them. His bright eyes dimmed. He sighed in disappointment and stepped out of the place. He showed himself on the clouds of Devil Bloodstar, his neck craning out of a gold rainbow as he shouted, "Shout! Did you contact the Elder Committee?" "I did," Rano shouted back. The battleships that Sho Jiao, Wu Feng, Jiao Shan, Mo Fu, and Fuller led were like a school of bloodthirsty sharks. They created a thick mesh net to surround Devil Bloodstar. The warriors of the major star areas roared and stormed out with terrifying auras. They began the first battle of the punitive war against the God Clan. They had outnumbered the God Clan's warriors in this area and their core had cooperated well with each other. The troops of Agate Star area couldn't compare to such elite forces. The warriors of the Ascot family, the Fernandez family, and the Bai family fell like a meteor shower. The ash-grey deadly aura covered the entire sky. Battleships were blown off under the brutal bombarding. Fragments of those battleships fell on the lakes and mountains of Devil Bloodstar. Devil Bloodstar's sea was dyed red while the immense sky was ash-grey with a deadly aura. The mountains collapsed and ignited. The trees burned into charcoal. This was the true scene of the doomsday. The god warriors were besieged and killed. Their life magnetic fields vanished. Their traces in this world all erased. Damn it! Why haven't they sent the sky bridge yet? Rano thundered and hissed at the sky, his face ferocious. He was releasing energy fluctuations that could even shatter an entire mountain. Deep in the space above people's heads, the dome of the sky was slashed as if someone had used a sword to tear a tent. The holy mountains emerged from the cuts. Those holy mountains hid in the thick mist. They represented the faith and spirit of the God Clan. From the mountains emerging from the torn space, the 7-colored heavenly stairs dropped down. The heavenly stairs looked like they were made of a rainbow with endless mysterious energy extending directly to Devil Bloodstar. 12 heavenly stairs floated above the 12 points that gathered many warriors of the God Clan. The 12 stairs had appeared at the most crucial moment to take their fellows back home. The god survivors had almost been hopeless. Seeing the heavenly stairs, they immediately rushed towards the 12 7-colored stairs. Right when their bodies touched the steps, they disappeared. Even the massive battleships had been teleported away from Devil Bloodstar to the unknown area when the rainbow light covered them. Yang Kai and Blood Devil roared angrily. They wanted to destroy those heavenly stairs. They accumulated earth-shaking energy attacks and bombarded the sky bridges. However, it was like they were hammering shadows. They couldn't damage anything. "Don't waste your efforts," Shang Chen frowned and sighed. "The sky bridge is another mysterious weapon of the God Clan. It will be like an illusion when you attack it. Not many people know how it works." The god warriors disappeared continuously. The Bai family's warriors were so thrilled by a sky bridge. They dashed toward the bridge and dozens of them flashed and then disappeared. The Bai family must be obliterated here. Kang Yun's voice arose from the dark void. He appeared with the true form of the white tiger from Heavenly Monster Tribe. His tiger eyes were wide open as he roared. His roaring was shaking even the void. Then, blood shed from his entire body. His drops of blood exploded in the air and triggered something or connecting this area to some mysterious area. A magical mark emerged in that area and transmitted the earth-destroying energy fluctuation. The mark revolved crazily. And then, an ancient dragon claw emerged from the mark and forcefully gripped a 7-colored sky bridge. The 7-colored heavenly stair that could bring the Bai family of Dry Bone Star area the hope of surviving was squeezed off by the ancient dragon claw. Even the mountain that dropped the stairs was shaken grumblingly. People in this area could even hear someone bellow in pain. When Bai Can of the Bai family saw the archaic dragon claw emerge, he paled and shivered. He attempted to run away. The dragon claw snatched over him from a distance. Just like there were some invisible ropes tying him, Bai Can was dragged into the mark. Before he disappeared into the mark, his body was deformed and bleeding. He couldn't escape this gory fate. Kang Yun of the Heavenly Monster Tribe kneeled down in the void. He was the descendant of Holy Beast White Tiger, but currently, He was like a little white kitten looking at the dragon claw and the mark disappearing with great respect. He didn't move. The members of the heavenly monster tribe emerged from the dark void. All of them were using their true bodies, lying on the battleships. After the dragon claw disappeared completely, they stood up. Obliterate the Bai family. Kang Yun stood up and walked out of the white mist. He transformed to his humanoid body and heartlessly looked at the Bai warriors who were shivering in fear. The heavenly monster warriors stormed over, showcasing their brutal features of the heavenly monsters. They bit and ripped the Bai warrior apart, devouring them. Their massive mouths chewed the bones while blood trickled down from the corners of their mouths like a small stream. They looked utterly savage. They were explicitly biting and swallowing the Bai warriors. This group of warriors had appeared in this area using their true bodies and showed the wild and ruthless features of the heavenly monster tribe. Many warriors of the forces sheltering on Devil Bloodstar felt shivers sending down their spines when they heard the sounds of the beasts chewing bones. They had cold sweat and instinctively, they moved away to avoid them. Sho Jiao and the others were still chasing after the God Clan's warriors who hadn't reached the sky bridges yet. The Ascot family and the Fernandez family had to bear a significant loss. Half of them had to stay in Devil Bloodstar forever. No. A member of the God Clan gawked and screamed, his eyeballs almost cracking in the deepest despair. The sky bridges faded out like an illusion vanishing. That space crack slowly closed. The Elder Committee in the faraway ancient God continent had decided to withdraw the sky bridges after the ancient dragon claw appeared. They seemed afraid. They were afraid that the mysterious divine tool that God Clan had spent a lot of efforts to refine could be damaged here. The God warriors abandoned here were destined to bury their bodies in Devil Bloodstar. It was the first time after several thousand years when God Clan was defeated in a battle in a different star area and their warriors couldn't withdraw safely. The legend of the invincible God Clan had ended here. Chapter 1223, Great Victory. Chapter 1223, Great Victory. Corpses covered the entire Devil Bloodstar. The sea was dyed red with blood. Pieces of flesh and limbs were scattered around the mountains, rivers, and forests. The planet was now like hell on earth. Half of the warriors from the Ascot family and Fernandez family had stayed here and became scattered corpses. The warriors of the Bai family from Dry Bone Star area were exterminated. The battleships of Sho Jiao, Wu Feng, Mo Fu, and the others were anchored outside Devil Bloodstar. They rode the war chariots, shouting and cheering. It was several days after the battle. Blood Devil, Gute, Bath, and Fu Wei had sent their warriors to clean the corpses, collecting weapons and battleships, and piling them on designated areas on Devil Bloodstar. Shong Chen had talked to Sho Jiao, Wu Feng, and the others. He had also met Shong Yingyu. They were now in Devil Bloodstar, their countenances solemn. There was one thing that had flustered them: Shi Yang had disappeared. Shong Chen, Sho Jiao, Blood Devil, and Kang Yun had searched around Devil Bloodstar and even Monster Dragonstar to find Shi Yang. Unfortunately, even after they had spent a lot of efforts, they couldn't locate Shi Yang. People then gathered on Devil Bloodstar. Shong Chen was stroking the dim-glowed jade on his chest and hesitating. And Leah and Shong Chen were waiting by him and looking at him. "Dad, is it really difficult to ask about his situation?" Shong Yingyu's clear eyes were filled with anger. And Leah urged her husband. "Don't linger. Ask them." She guessed that the stone on Shong Chen's chest could contact the bloodthirsty force. This force was the most mysterious force in this world with hidden, unknown power. They even had ears and eyes in the God Clan. Otherwise, when the Elder Committee decided to use the God punishment, Shong Chen could never know it to warn them. As Shi Yang had disappeared all of a sudden, there were two possibilities in this case. The God Clan had killed him, or he had run away because he was wounded. As long as they could confirm that the God Clan hadn't killed him, they would know that Shi Yang was safe. And that was enough to Shong Yingyu. "You women are so annoying." All right. I'm going to ask them. Sigh, they will laugh at my face." Shong Chen sighed and mumbled with a bitter face. "If they don't contact me, I'm sure that kid is all right. But you guys don't believe me." "Ah." A bright gold halo emitted from Shang Chen's eyes. He quieted down and the jade on his chest fluctuated soul energy as if someone was ringing him. He frowned and used the soul to communicate, his face angry. After several seconds, Shang Chen took a deep breath and then snorted. "He's all right." When Fick chased after him, he had escaped to the ancient continent he had fused its origin with. He's recovering his wounds now, so he doesn't have the power to open a space door to get back here. Shang Yingyu exhaled in relief and said, "I'm going to tell Shuo Jiao and Kang Yun this." Shang Chen waved his hand to dismiss her. After she had left, he turned to his wife, his face heavy. "What do you think about the relationship between our little Yu and Shi Yang?" "I think Shi Yang is not a bad option. His realm is extraordinary and his powers Upanishads are powerful." "Yeah, a good match to our daughter," said Enlia. Shang Chen knitted his brows and snorted, "That kid has so many beauties. As far as I've concerned, there are 3 women with ambiguous relationships with him staying on Devil Blood Star. We don't know how many more he will have in the future. Yeah, it's troublesome," and Leah sighed as she had a headache. "Then, I will talk to little Yu. That kid is unfaithful. I think when she knows that, she'll give him up. What do you think? Our little Yu isn't a little girl anymore. It's hard for her to like someone. She's liked only one guy until now. Sigh, it's too bad that it's that kid. When you talk to her, try to use nice words. Don't create a reverse effect," Shang Chen said begrudgingly. "Yes, I know that." When Shuo Jiao, Kang Yun, and the others knew that Shi Yang had gone to the ancient continent to cultivate and heal his wounds, they were able to finally ease their minds. Shuo Jiao, Mo Fu, Wu Feng, Wu Bai, and Blood Devil talked for a while. They exchanged seals of the teleport formations and then drove their battleships back home. The seals that they left included the coordinates of the ancient formation in their clans and forces. Once Shi Yang got back, he could use the coordinates to find them easily. Kang Yun and the members of the Heavenly Monster Tribe decided to wait for Shi Yang. However, they didn't linger on Devil Blood Star. Barth and Gut had invited them to visit Monster Dragon Star. The Monster Dragon Star was the Monster Clan's territory. Barth and Gut were the big leaders of the clan and they had the blood of the immemorial heavenly monsters in their veins. They had families and dearly feeling for Kang Yun. When Kang Yun told them the relationship between their tribes, Barth and Gut were so thrilled. They had treated Kang Yun and the heavenly monster warriors as their distinguished guests. Fu Wei and Blood Devil had sent their warriors to collect the battleships of the God Clan and the Bai family. They categorized the armors, weapons, pellets, and materials they had collected and distributed to the other forces by their contribution to the recent battle. After the battle, although the ones who decided to fight until death had received some damages, the materials from the God Clan and the Bai family were enough to make up for their loss. Everybody was excited because of this perfect outcome. The leaders of the forces knew for whom the reinforcements had come from Fu Wei. The name Shi Yang became well known around the entire Agate Star area. He had become the savior of the star area who earned respect from warriors of all forces. They didn't know that when the name Shi Yang was carved in the bottom of their hearts, it had also shaken the other major star areas and resulted in applause from the big clans and forces around the universe. In the battle taken place in Agate Star area, the God Clan had sent the Ascot family and the Fernandez family together with the Bai family of Dry Bone Star area. They used the God Punishment and the Sky Bridges. And the results were the obliteration of the Bai family. Half of the warriors of the Ascot family and the Fernandez family had to bury their corpses in the battlefield. Their power had massively decreased and they had to run away helter-skelter. This was the only time throughout the past thousands of years that the God Clan had to bear such bitter fruit. After this battle, the Ascot family and the Fernandez family had become the weakest families of the God Clan. It was a significant humiliation to the God Clan, but it cheered up the other major star areas. Shi Yang had connected many forces in this battle and his name was famous now. He was now known as the successor of the Bloodthirsty Force, the new descendant of the immortal Demon Clan, the eternal ally of the Heavenly Monster Tribe, and the first warrior to ever succeed in resisting against the God Clan. His name had become a hot topic and people were talking about him everywhere. The bad defeat of the God Clan had boosted the others' morale. They now knew that the God Clan wasn't invincible. The warriors who were trying to survive under the pressure of the God Clan in many star areas began to have different thoughts. And the forces that were in a dangerous situation in a battle against the God Clan felt new vitality pouring in them when they heard the good news. They gritted their teeth and clenched their jaws to resist. They would never yield. Just like Fiery Rain Star area. Inside a group of asteroids that had red soil, many warriors of Fiery Rain Star area were hiding. Yu Shan, Xiao Yan, Xian Fei stayed with many other warriors there. They all looked tired. The God Clan had chased after them for a long time. After so many struggles, they had come to this area. They felt so hopeless. Benny wore a cold face and he stood upright between Yu Shan and Xiao Yan. His eyes experienced frost and wind. He gathered his spirit and then asked, "Is it true?" Yu Shan beamed a rare smile. "Confirmed. It's true." She screamed excitedly. The God Clan was defeated in Agate Star area, right next to us. The battle against the God Clan has a big victory. Half of the Ascot family and the Fernandez family were killed, and the Bai family was uprooted. The dispirited warriors of Fiery Rain Star area started to cheer loudly when they heard Yu Shan screaming. Xiao Yan grinned and then turned to Benny, talking earnestly. "Shi Yang has done all of these. He facilitated the defeat of the God Clan. However, the threat in Fiery Rain Star area is still there. We still need you. Help us contact Shi Yang." When he talked to Benny, he was extremely respectful. It was because Benny had brought the positive changes to Fiery Rain Star area for many years. Half of the merits in this star area's war belonged to Benny. "I will try my best," said Benny arrogantly. He discreetly clenched his fists, his shoulder quivering. Apparently, he was so excited. God Clan, Ancient God Hall, God Zenith. The ancient god statues stood solemnly in the quiet hall. Under those statues sat the 12 God Clansmen. Surprisingly, Fick and Rano were there too. The chiefs of the 12 families of the God Clan were summoned. The Elder Committee asked them to come at the fastest speed no matter where they were. Today, the chiefs of all the 12 families of the God Clan had gathered. The current chief of the Bradley family, Bias, was sitting neatly under a statue in the center. His white hair draped around his shoulder. He looked stern and resolute, and his eyes were like stars, mysterious and unpredictable. He looked at Rano and Fick and thundered, "You two still have the face to come here? Our clan has been prosperous for 10,000 years and because of your defeat, our morale has reduced massively. You should die to pay for your sin." Fick and Rano discolored, but they stayed silent instead of answering. They had made mistakes, so they didn't dare to snap back. The Bradley family was the strongest family among the 12 families of the God Clan. Even when they were at their peak, the Ascot and the Fernandez families weren't as strong as the Bradley family, let alone now when they were damaged badly. Bias was the chief of the Bradley family, his power Upanishad extraordinary at third sky of incipient God realm. Rumors said that he was just half a step away from the immortal realm. It was also the reason why Fick and Rano didn't dare to retort. "Bias, what do you have to criticize them? If Haig hadn't failed, how could many things have happened like that? It's your son's fault. He made my son Harson die there. Your Bradley family has to bear the responsibility." A lanky old man with a sinister face bellowed, his eyes flaring like a wild flame. He looked as if he wanted to fight Bias instantly. This man was the chief of the Charteris family, Harson's father, Charlint. He was the God Clan's butcher and the most combative expert of the God Clan. He had the mad power of the Charteris family. If Harson hadn't messed it up and troubled Haig a lot, how could Shi Yang have taken the Genesis fruit? Snorted Bias. All right. The Elder Committee has confined Haig in the God-sealing cliff to repay for his mistake. If he can't break through to incipient God realm, he will never be able to get out of there. It's a critical time. "Don't quarrel," said Imor, the chief of the Brahmos family. He comforted the other two and prevented them from causing an internal dispute. While they were discussing, the ancient statue in the ancient God Hall released turbulent soul energy. The soul altars of the elders emerged above the statues. One of them merely announced the decisions of the Elder Committee, Declare the overall war. Chapter 1224, Just like that year. Chapter 1224, Just like that year. The dark forest in Grace Mainland. Inside a cave that was covered with grass, a young man sat inside a dry lake. He closed his eyes and sat still like a 1,000-year-old rock. Time flew fast. After an unknown time, the young man's fingers twitched. He opened his eyes and looked around. That man was Shiyang. Thick at third sky of incipient god realm had wounded both Shiyang's soul and body on Devil Bloodstar. The cracks on his soul altar hadn't recovered until now. Fortunately, with the blood essence crystal, his body healed. When his soul altar cracked, he had used the immortal demon blood to cross the space. The first location that popped up in his mind at that time was this place, a cave where his soul landed into this world that year. He fell into the blood pond. The blood in the blood pond was used up a long time ago to help him transform. It was currently dried up. He sat in the pond and used the blood essence crystal to recover. He healed until today. However, the cracks in his soul altar couldn't be mended within one day. Looking at the blood pond, the spider webs weaving above his head, and the layers of dust on the ground, Shiyang kept silent. It had been hundreds of years. His soul had come to this world and possessed the body of the guy named Shiyang who was investigating the vestiges of an ancient area. Then, he used his body to live in this world. Slowly, he had grown and reached third sky of ethereal god realm. He had become the most dazzling star in the vast sea of stars. Returning to this cradle after many years, he couldn't hold his emotions. Getting up, he stooped to watch the blood pond. He suddenly got something in his mind and waved. The dust covering the blood pond was blown away, revealing the bottom of the blood pond. There was a magical drawing carved there. Shiyang had never noticed it before. This drawing was very similar to the blood shield with the blood mark in the center, which was the crest of the bloodthirsty force. That mark had an evil, magical power that could seep tens of thousands of miles deep underground to vaguely connect to Grace Mainland's origin. It was a marvelous formation. With his current knowledge, it wasn't enough to comprehend the mysteries of this wonderful formation. At this moment, the formation was broken. It was out of order. He understood that this formation had used the origin of Grace Mainland to guide his soul here. However, it was overloaded and then broken. Anyway, it could bring Shiyang's soul to this world. The one who had cast this formation was the chief of the dark, Laro Luo. Shiyang was sure that Laro Luo had used the blood vein ring and the power of the origin to complete such an earth-shaking deed. Staring at the strange formation for a while, Shiyang tried to contact the blood vein ring. However, the ring spirit didn't answer. Frowning, Shiyang tried to stimulate his soul altar and urge his power Upanishad. His brain then tingled and the soul altar cracked. It startled him. He didn't dare to try furthermore. When Fick attacked him fatally, he had used the gold saws to cut his soul altar and extract his soul. It had damaged his soul altar severely and he couldn't even use his power Upanishad. If he forced it harder, his soul altar would have more cracking noises. As he couldn't use his power Upanishad, he couldn't create a space passage. He couldn't leave this place now. He knew many things that could mend his soul, but he didn't have any of them now. He had to go to Devil Bloodstar to find Fu Wei, Shong Chen, and Blood Devil to take those things to treat his soul altar and mend those cracks. He wasn't worried about the war in Agate Star area. Before he had run away, Sho Jiao, Wu Feng, and the others had arrived. The God Clan were going to be the losers to the forces of Agate Star area. Currently, his soul altar had been damaged badly and he couldn't use his supernatural abilities. He was restricted a lot, so he could use only his strong body to move around. He tried to figure out how to contact the people in Devil Bloodstar and ask them to take something to cure his soul altar. Turning around to look at the cave, he chuckled and walked out. Just like that year. He still remembered Miss Mo Yang Yu of the Mo family. He had quarreled with her. Today, recalling it, he smiled. Taking in the fresh air, he was surprised. Then, when he recognized it, he laughed happily. The earth and heaven energy in this dark forest was abundant. It was almost as much as what a level 2 or 3 life star could have. It was dozens of times thicker than when he had left the continent. It was the first time Shi Yang recognized that all of these changes were because of him. He suddenly felt light-hearted. He wandered aimlessly through the dark forest. For the time being, he put aside the worries in his mind to behold the beauty of nature. Strangely, when he relaxed and put aside the worries of his wounded soul altar, he vaguely felt a tingle from the cracks on his soul altar. Shi Yang was surprised, but he seemed to get something. He then tried to relax more. The dark forest looked the same. It still had demonic beasts and of course, the warriors would take risks to hunt them. As Shi Yang was wearing dark clothes and wandering around the forest alone, he had aroused the greed of other hunters. However, whenever they saw him and wanted to attack him, Shi Yang just frowned and released a bit of his aura. Those warriors then ran away for their lives like stray dogs. The gap between their realms was so vast. Even when his soul altar was damaged and he didn't dare to urge the power Upanishad, he just needed to show off a beam of energy in his body to scare away the warriors at Nascent and Disaster Realm. He still wandered around and tried to not think about his damaged soul altar or use the soul consciousness. He just strolled aimlessly. Although he was nonchalant, his route was unconsciously the same as that year when the Mo family captured him to be a medicinal slave. Finally, he had seized the chance when the Mo family fought the White Blade Jade Spider to run away. He was now walking that path one more time. That year was the first time he recognized the ability of his acupuncture points and used them to take in the essence chi. He had been subtle and patient to grow and survive. After more than 200 years, he had reached the peak of the ethereal god realm. As soon as he could understand the true meanings of life and death power Upanishad, he could break through to incipient god realm. Thinking about the realms and time, he felt like he had lived several lives. Shi Yang didn't need to use the soul altar and the power Upanishad to comprehend his power Upanishads. As he was walking, he was absorbed into his world of thoughts, thinking about life and death. Gradually, he was flustered as if he was about to fall into bedevilment. Shi Yang didn't recognize it. He was still thinking and walking ahead, his face bewildered. Today, he reached a big ancient tree. He stopped when a memory popped up. He knew this tree. That year, he used to cultivate nearby. At this spot, he had his first woman, a female mercenary called Dilan Ya, and the first woman who had touched his heart. A girl called Mu Yu Dai. Images of the old memory crossed his heart. Shi Yang stood still as if he was slumbering and he couldn't tell between reality and fantasy. He was still lingering in between the thoughts of life and death. The lush ancient tree withered as its life weakened. The big branches dried and yellowed like a senile old man who was walking to the end of his life. The water murmuring arose behind the tree where Shi Yang could see a small bamboo house. The house was situated between the stream and many flowers. Someone was playing a clear and pleasant melody. When the sounds from the string emerged, Shi Yang was shaken. His eyes flared up with a strange light. He walked like he was dreaming towards the bamboo house, his face odd. This melody was exactly like that year. It was so familiar. At this moment, Shi Yang wasn't sure if it was a hallucination of his or if it was real. He kept walking to the house. When he reached the bamboo house, he pushed the door open, his face shocked. At first sight, he saw a white-headed old woman backing him, facing a window and playing music with her strings. She didn't recognize that he was here. The old woman was wrinkled and senile. Her wild hair cascaded on her waist. She also had an energy fluctuation, but her vitality was feeble. It meant that her life was at the end of its journey. Shi Yang looked at the old woman, his face so strange. He just listened to her music and couldn't say a word. After the old woman finished her melody, she sighed and spoke in a husky voice. "You've enjoyed my music. Please leave. Don't bother my quiet moment." Shi Yang kept silent. He seemed to be rooted here, so he didn't move an inch. The old woman was so indignant. She coughed and then turned around. Abruptly, she was shocked. Pointing at Shi Yang, she was shaking hard. She opened her mouth on her wrinkled face to say something, but she couldn't make a sound. Tears rolled down her face even before she could get a hold of herself to speak. Shi Yang observed her, his face awkward. After a long time, he quivered and sighed, I didn't think it was you. Yeah, I didn't think it was you too. The old woman sobbed, her face wet with tears. Although she looked so old, her facial features told him that she was a beautiful woman when she was young. She gave him a sad smile, I can say that I will not regret anything when I can meet you one more time before I die. After more 200 years, you still look the same as the first day we met. You haven't changed a bit, but I'm this senile. I'm going to die. Where's Diyalan? Shi Yang sighed. She couldn't make it to nascent realm. Her time was over. She had gone ahead of me. Mu Yu Dai forced a smile and pointed at the bamboo room next to hers. She lived there. We had each other company. She died naturally from thirst years ago. Why? Shi Yang shook his head. I just wanted to see you again. Even if I can't, I can still recall my memory. Mu Yu Dai coughed and stooped her head. You should have returned earlier when I wasn't this old so I could have the face to meet people. Seeing me like this, I'm sure you're disappointed. Why do you have to be so persistent? Shi Yang sighed again. I just wanted to tell you that I was wrong that year. Hatred had blinded me. I couldn't hold you. That's why I've been regretting it for 200 years, said Mu Yu Dai gently. Those old stories have faded away in my mind. I don't remember your mistake. I just remember, you used to make me have feelings for you. Shi Yang pondered for a while and then said, this pellet can supply more vitality to increase your longevity. I hope we could meet again. Then, he took in the glimpse of the bamboo room where Diyalan used to live. He sighed, took out a bottle of wine, and drank. He staggered out of the place, singing loudly, in between the lines of life and death. Born in a dream, die in a dream. Under this vast sky and the eternal universe, destiny will bring us through thousands of miles to meet up. The true meanings of life and death power Upanishad and transmigration twirled in his sea of consciousness, advancing rapidly. Chapter 1225, The Azure Dragon Wakes Up. Chapter 1225, The Azure Dragon Wakes Up. Giving up the junk thoughts, Shi Yang departed from the dark forest after purifying his soul. He didn't use his power Upanishad and just walked like a normal human or more like a drunk. Starting from the dark forest, he had walked through Sky Meteor City to the dead swamp and then the endless sea. Crossing the dark magnetic noxious mist, he reached divine great land. Shi Yang had walked on the routes he used to walk many years ago in Grace Mainland. He had visited each place he used to fight others or places he had broken into a new realm. Every place was like a camera roll of pictures that were unfolding in his head. He didn't care about time and just sank in there. Eventually, he reached the demon area where he had been teleported to outer space together with Bao Ao and Jie Jie. He stopped by the Demogon statue, the source of power Upanishad inheritance of the ruined demon area. This place was the demon area connected to Grace Mainland. However, it was a small domain in a big world. The demon clansmen were all relocated, so Shi Yang found no shadow in this area. The teleport formation that had delivered Shi Yang, Bao Ao, Jie Ji, and Bo Ru to Raging Flamestar area lay there under a thick layer of dust. Shi Yang sat down cross-legged on the formation and closed his eyes to meditate. This teleport formation was the terminal that had ended his story in Grace Mainland. He left from here and entered outer space and Raging Flamestar area. It had turned his life to a new page. His surroundings were dead silent. There was no living creature's energy fluctuation. His soul altar quieted down and the vitality in his body gradually calmed down. Eventually, even his heart stopped beating. He was like a dead man and the surroundings were affected by his condition. Everything now had the dead chi. The tough wild grass around him withered and died. Gradually, the entire demon area was filled with dead chi because of him. It was like death had paid attention to this area all of a sudden. No plant could survive. There was no beam of life energy fluctuation. It seemed like the earth and heaven energy had also abandoned this area and scattered elsewhere. The demon area where Shi Yang was sitting had turned into a desolate area. There was no light, no air, and no sound. And Shi Yang himself had been as still as a dead man. At a corner of the vast universe that was hidden deep in a dark void, there was a vast azure sea. It stayed behind layers of thick black mist that they had to go through the mist to see the sea. Above the dark azure sea were thousands of floating meteorites. Some were as small as a fist and some were even bigger than an entire continent. Those meteorites scattered around the azure sea, but they weren't still. Sometimes, they bobbed with the sea water. A brilliant light curtain floated above the azure sea and extended to an area far away that people couldn't see. This light curtain had so many space slits that released brutal energy fluctuations as if they had countless meteors flying around that even incipient God Realm experts would have been smashed if they were wandering there. If Shi Yang was there, he would have figured out that the radiant light above the sea was very similar to a place he knew. The river of outer space. When he was in Raging Flamestar area, he had triggered the power of the empty fantasy crystal to escape. It took him to that river. That outer space river had many 5-colored rocks bobbing in different sizes. However, the water of that river was gray and murky, and the river also had a light road that was filled with space slits. Shi Yang used to learn space power Upanishad in that place. At that time, Shi Yang, Feng Rao, Bao Ao, and others had fallen into the river. From Feng Rao, Shi Yang knew that near the other end of the land of God punishment was a dead star that could navigate them out of the outer space river. Also, Feng Rao had told them frankly that she didn't know what was at the other end of the outer space river. She told them that no one in Raging Flamestar area had reached that end of the outer space river. At that time, the other end of the outer space river was an unsolved riddle. They never knew that there was an azure sea with many floating meteorites situated on the other end of the river. Those meteorites were moving as if they were alive. Or perhaps they were some kind of marvelous formation. Today, some shadows appeared on a meteorite that was even bigger than Divine Great Land in the dark azure sea on the other end of the outer space river. Surprisingly, they were the precursors of Heavenly Monster Tribe. There were many bottomless holes and abysses on that meteorite that they couldn't see the bottom. Vaguely, a formidable energy fluctuation emerged. That fluctuation was so earth-shaking that it stirred up the entire sea. It seemed like the energy fluctuation had come directly from the bottom of the sea. Many areas on this massive meteorite had deep, massive scratches. At the same time, those scratches were solemn as if it could destroy any creature that dared to trespass the area. Some precursors of the Heavenly Monster Tribe scattered around a massive abyss. They lay face down on the ground and turned back to their monster forms. There was the brilliant gold unicorn, dozens of thousands of meters long pythons, the flying 3-legged gold craw, and even the flaming phoenix. They were surrounding the deep abyss and chanting something. The 3-legged gold crow was holding a bleeding body in its claw. It was the Bai family's chief, Bai Kan. Mysterious and magical symbols flew out of space slits above the outer space river. There were billions of them in so many colors. They looked like mountains, the sea, and even forests. Each of them was marvelous and inexplicable. The billions of symbols had flown out of the space slits and descended like raindrops. All of them had plunged into the deep abyss. The water of the azure sea was boiling and bubbling wildly, transmitting the earth-shaking energy. Many small meteorites exploded. Smaller pieces of them fell into the sea and disappeared. From time to time, the sea emitted dazzling cyan light, rippling and covering the entire sea. It gave it a life energy fluctuation. That intimidating commotion lasted for a long time. The 4 precursors of Heavenly Monster Tribe calmed down. They transformed back into their humanoid bodies. They all looked tired as if they had just used a lot of energy. Their eyes were strangely bright as if they were waiting for something. Time ticked hurriedly. After a long time, the azure sea quieted down. The outer space river seemed to lower as if half of its water was evaporated. The 4 old heavenly monsters kneeled on the ground, their eyes fixed on the biggest abyss. Eventually, a terrible cough arose from the abyss. Right after that, a senile old man crawled out of the abyss and gasped for his breath. Holy Ancestor! The 4 old heavenly monster precursors cried happily. Apparently, they were thrilled. The old man was still panting. He had snow-white hair and a pair of strangely bright cyan eyes. He waved his hand powerlessly. I've just woken up. I need energy. Sigh, immortal are immortal. Only the soul is immortal though. If the body doesn't have enough energy to resist, it will still be hopeless and vulnerable. While he was talking, his eyes sparkled. People could see billions of symbols moving in his pupils. They were the symbols that descended from space slits above their heads. The old man lifted his head to look at the sky. Then, he opened his mouth and drew. Beams of pure energy hidden in the space slit poured into his mouth like streams. After those streams had poured into his mouth, most of the space slits above his head exploded and vanished eventually. At the same time, his senile body was now like a dried tree in the springtime. He was filled up and the wrinkles on his face stretched. His skin was now glowing in good health. After 10 breaths, he had transformed from a dying old man into a brawny, middle-aged man. He shook his head and said, "Not enough. It's too bad that we need to leave now." The 4 precursors of the heavenly monster tribe bowed, their faces respectful. The elder with the human head and the snake body said, "Our ancestral land has fused with the Genesis fruit. Our tribe will rise again. Holy ancestor, please guide us. Let's go to Agate Star area." He pondered for a while and then ordered. Although the old monsters didn't know why, they didn't object. All nodded. Monster Dragon Star in Agate Star area. Kang Yun and the members of Heavenly Monster Tribe were staying at Monster Dragon Star. From Kang Yun, Gut, and Barth knew the relationship between the Monster Clan and Heavenly Monster Tribe. They also knew the reason why they could progress faster. It was because of the Heavenly Monster Tribe bloodline in their bodies. Kang Yun hadn't told them the relationship between Grace Mainland and the Heavenly Monster Tribe's bloodline. He just told them that the biggest opportunity had come to the Monster Clan. Monsters who had the Heavenly Monster Tribe's bloodline were going to harvest a lot of benefits. Barth and Gut had treated the Heavenly Monsters warriors as their distinguished guests. They respected the others so much. However, there was an exception. Ghost Hunter didn't give them face. If he didn't have his preserved cultivating place in Monster Dragon Star, he wasn't going to return. He didn't meet Kang Yun. Right after they had returned to Monster Dragon Star, he went and sealed himself in his cultivating valley. He didn't get out or meet anybody. He didn't even give Gut face. Gu Mo had visited him many times, but he was kept outside by Ghost Hunter's barrier. Gu Mo was upset, but the feelings she had for him were rooted in her heart. She couldn't do anything but wait for him in the valley not far from there. She wasn't interested in Kang Yun or the other members of the Heavenly Monster Tribe. She was dedicated to Ghost Hunter only. Kang Yun stayed at Monster Dragon Star for the time being. He knew about the commotions at Devil Blood Star through Gut and Barth. He asked them to notify him immediately when Shi Yang was back. Kang Yun was waiting for him. Oh, of course, he wasn't idle. He had set up a space teleport formation at Monster Dragon Star that could move through star areas. That space teleport formation was built already. He just needed to reinstall it. Today, that formation glowed all of a sudden. Kang Yun looked shocked. He immediately recognized the change. His body flashed and disappeared. He reappeared and guarded the entrance of the formation. The immense light emerged. The precursors of Heavenly Monster Tribe walked out of the light. Kang Yun bowed to greet them and called their names with respect: Elder Hugo, Elder Nathan, Elder Tianyin, Elder Aogu. Ah, holy ancestor. Seeing him, Kang Yun kneeled down and lowered his body to the ground, his face thrilled. He looked at the middle-aged man and cried. The middle-aged man he called Holy Ancestor smiled lovingly and rubbed Kang Yun's head. "Well done, kid." Kang Yun was excited, quivering. Only the 4 holy beasts of Heavenly Monster Tribe could become holy ancestors. White Tiger had buried his body in Desolate. Shi Yang had found the remains of the vermilion bird, and Zhuosha had received the inheritance from the black tortoise. Thus, this holy ancestor of theirs was the holy ancestor Azure Dragon, one of the ancestors of Heavenly Monster Tribe. The holy beast Azure Dragon's soul was immortal. After so many years and Kalpa, he had still survived. Chapter 1226, The Monster Ancestors' Blood Sacrifice. Chapter 1226, The Monster Ancestors' Blood Sacrifice. The holy beast Azure Dragon had appeared in Monster Dragon Star. After he had walked out of the teleport formation, he smiled and rubbed Kang Yun's head, appraising him. Kang Yun was so excited. Azure Dragon's eyes were ancient and experienced, his body muscular. He pondered and then triggered his blood. As Barth and Gut were in the other remote area on the Monster Dragon, their monster bodies shook as the drops of Heavenly Monster Tribe's blood had bounced as if they wanted to get out of their bodies. The members of Brutal Dragon Tribe and Evil Dragon Tribe with Heavenly Monster Tribe's blood in their bodies could sense something. They were astounded as they didn't know what had just happened to them. The holy beast Azure Dragon looked awkward and embarrassed. Kang Yun stooped. He suddenly got something and his mouth arched into an odd curve. He could guess why the holy ancestor looked strange. Heavenly Monster Tribe had many monster ancestors. The immemorial creatures that Grace Mainland had given birth to were all addressed as monster ancestors. However, the 4 holy beasts held high positions in Heavenly Monster Tribe. Guarding 4 directions of Grace Mainland, they had innate supernatural abilities. Kang Yun had heard many legends of the holy ancestor Azure Dragon. However, most of them were related to being licentious and unrestrained. He could never be amused without women. Rumors said that after Azure Dragon had left the ancestral star, he wasn't constrained anymore. He had kidnapped women from different races to satisfy himself. Thus, he had so many children and grandchildren. His descendants had more or less his blood. However, it was diluted so they weren't his successors. In this cosmos, 90% of the monster tribes with the word dragon in their names were his descendants, including the Ice Dragon, the Flood Dragon, the Evil Dragon, the Brutal Dragon, and more. When he arrived at Monster Dragon Star and checked his blood, he found that many of them answered him. The blood that could resonate with his was the result of his absurd youth. Thinking for a while, Azure Dragon couldn't remember which races the women of the Brutal Dragon Tribe and the Evil Dragon Tribe were from. Recalling his time of lustful youth, he forced a smile. As the 4 old monsters of Heavenly Monster Tribe knew the ugly truth, they tried to hold their laughter. Azure Dragon pretended to know nothing. He used his soul consciousness to cover the entire Monster Dragon Star. All of a sudden, he let out a low scream, his face strange. He frowned and pondered for seconds while gazing at Kang Yun. Then, he flashed and brought Hugo, Nathan, Tian Yin, and Aogu away. Those 4 monsters were the main line of the Gold Crow, the Phoenix, the Heaven Python, and the Unicorn. They disappeared quickly. Kang Yun was left at his spot. After a while, he brought the 4 monsters and reappeared at the valley where Ghost Hunter was cultivating. Strange light shot out of his eyes as he studied a sealed cave. The barrier at the entrance of the cave was torn as he was gazing at it. Ghost Hunter, who was closing his eyes to cultivate in the cave, was exposed. Ghost Hunter was filled with brutal chi. He wanted to storm over and question the others. But then, he paled. The middle-aged man with deep and experienced eyes had something very solemn on his body that made Ghost Hunter want to kneel down in front of him. It was like he was facing his primal ancestor. He was shocked and couldn't have the thought of resisting. He had never had this feeling. "Who are you?" Ghost Hunter lowered his voice and hissed. Azure Dragon didn't answer. He rose one hand and pinched the void. Ghost Hunter was immediately grabbed and dragged toward him, turning directly into his monster form. He was a savage, fearsome beast with many spikes on his body. His eyes were ferocious like an ancient varmint. The 4 old monsters of the Heavenly Monster Tribe were baffled as they looked at Ghost Hunter. From Ghost Hunter, they could feel an extraordinary aura. That aura consisted of the aura of the Heavenly Monster Tribe's precursors, which was so ancient but matched with their ancestors. "Holy Ancestor," cried Hugo, the descendant of the Gold Crow. Azure Dragon kept silent. He studied Ghost Hunter and touched something in the void. A drop of blood flew out Ghost Hunter's glabella and fell on the palm of Azure Dragon's hand. Just like a sprouting seed, the drop of blood and the lines on Azure Dragon's palm connected magically. He looked concerned as he was using his own blood to check the mysteries of Ghost Hunter's drop of blood. The four monsters looked at Ghost Hunter. They became more astonished and skeptical. After a long time, Azure Dragon returned the drop of blood to Ghost Hunter. Right after that, he became solemn and an earth-shaking energy fluctuation arose around him. A drop of blood was forced out of his fingertip. The energy fluctuated from that drop of blood wasn't less powerful than an incipient God realm expert's. Holy Ancestor! The four monsters screamed in unison. After Azure Dragon had squeezed out a blood drop of life, his face became paler. He turned and told the others, "You four. Each of you shall offer a blood drop of life." The four old monsters discolored in fright, but they didn't dare to not follow Azure Dragon's words. They winced bitterly when they urged their powers to condense the blood drop of life from their blood. Shortly after, 4 drops of blood appeared in their hands. Each of them had a different energy, but they were all intimidating. Azure Dragon's eyes flared with a magical light. Billions of symbols seemed to have revived. 5 lightning columns suddenly appeared and covered the drops of blood from Azure Dragon himself and the 4 descendants of the heavenly monster tribe, forcefully shoving them into Ghost Hunter's glabella. The 4 old monsters were shocked. Holy Ancestor! The 4 couldn't help but cry. Azure Dragon turned around and threw them a glance as he asked, "What's the matter? Shouldn't we use this blood-sacrificing technique on Kang Yun?" Kang Yun had risked his life to go to Desolate and earned the merit of our heavenly monster tribe. It was his efforts for the blood sacrifice from you, Holy Ancestor. "Why did you use it on this fella?" said the heavenly python. The other 3 had the same concern. The blood sacrifice was a mysterious technique that only monster ancestors could do. Being given the blood drop of life of the monster ancestors, the monsters could increase their powers, refine their bodies, and advance their overall competencies quickly. Taking Kang Yun as an example, he had the cultivation base of level 12, which was equivalent to a warrior at 3rd sky of ethereal god realm. If the Azure Dragon gave him his blood, he could have advanced directly to level 13, the incipient god realm. The heavenly monster tribe's cultivation path was different from the other races. They didn't need to understand their realm deeply. When their monster body grew or transformed, they could break through instantly. However, this process was so slow. It took even more time than what normal races needed to understand their realm and break through. Azure Dragon was the holy ancestor of the heavenly monster tribe. His blood was the most perfect blood with fantastic effects. Kang Yun had survived strenuously for 10 years on Desolate. He had facilitated Shi Yang to take the Genesis fruit to improve the entire heavenly monster tribe. Normally, Kang Yun was the most eligible nominee to receive Azure Dragon's blood sacrifice. In fact, Azure Dragon came to Monster Dragonstar to prepare the celebration of the blood sacrifice for Kang Yun to help him reach level 13. However, Azure Dragon had used the blood sacrifice on Ghost Hunter and he had forced the 4 monsters to hand out their blood drop of life. It had baffled the 4 old monsters. Even Kang Yun wouldn't receive this treatment. Previously, they knew that Azure Dragon had planned to use a blood drop of life from his body to nurture Kang Yun and he didn't require them to do the same. Using the lifeblood would have made them feeble for a long time. But now, the 4 old monsters didn't understand his deed. Azure Dragon didn't mind them as he was forcing the blood to enter Ghost Hunter's glabella. Strangely, Ghost Hunter closed his eyes to receive. Amazingly, his monster body started to have many magical symbols, which looked ancient and rough. Those were the symbols of mountains, lakes, and even rivers. Ghost Hunter had the illusion of the mountains in Heavenly Monster Mountain Range on his back. Azure Dragon's eyes brightened. He concentrated more on operating his technique. The other 4 old monsters cried loudly, "The immemorial monster's symbols. The seal of the Heavenly Monster Mountain Range is in our ancestral star. This young man comes from our ancestral star." They suddenly understood something. Their eyes shot out dazzling light as they clenched their fists in excitement. Only the monster with the inheritance from Heavenly Monster Mountain Range could have the seal and the ancient symbols on the body. Also, only the monster blood of Heavenly Monster Tribe could receive that inheritance. Evidently, Ghost Hunter wasn't an ordinary monster. Azure Dragon was focused and billions of symbols danced in his eyes like a school of swimming fish. The 5 bolts of lightning were burning on Ghost Hunter's glabella to integrate the blood into his head. Gradually, Ghost Hunter's monster body was wound with lightning. The bolts of lightning were now dancing on his monster body. Ghost Hunter screeched and shrieked crazily. Blood splashed from his body as if he was enduring the great pain. The blood splashing from Ghost Hunter's body was confined by Azure Dragon's power. He then forced Ghost Hunter's blood into thin threads and guided them back to Ghost Hunter's glabella. It was like a circulation. Time ticked fast. Azure Dragon retrieved his hands, his face tired. Ghost Hunter was now a big lightning ball. His cracked body inside the lightning ball seemed to be taking in energy that changed fast. This process was so marvelous. Compared to Kang Yun, he's more suitable to receive the blood sacrifice. Azure Dragon finally looked at the 4 old monsters, his eyes deep and dark. You're right. Our time is coming. Our heavenly monster tribe has not only the Genesis fruit but also him. He pointed at Ghost Hunter. The other 4 monsters were bewildered. Azure Dragon just laughed and explained nothing to them. In the coming 10,000 years, he'll be the key of our clan's prosperity. It's true that it's our clan's turn to be the overlords in our area and the entire universe. Grace Mainland. In a dark, quiet place, a man covered in a thick layer of dust was sitting under the 7 Demogon statues. It looked like he was dead for years. There was no vitality from him. Surrounding him was a dead place too. There was no plant or any small insect that existed. The whole place was shrouded in dead silence. After a long, long time, the withered grass around that man suddenly became green. Shortly after, many tenacious plants began to grow. The desolate demon area now had a strange life energy. It was slightly perceptible at first and then it slowly started growing. The entire demon area was now full of life. Grass and flowers bloomed everywhere and insects started singing. Everything looked so green and beautiful. Then, wind, sunlight, and the fresh aura of nature filled the entire area. The barren, dead quiet demon area was now a life star full of earth and heaven energy. And the one who was covered in dust began to have feeble breathing. His aura was increasing continuously and surging like a rising tide. A thick, vigorous, life-magnetic field emerged. It was like the scorching sun. Chapter 1227. Create the Miracle. Chapter 1227. Create the Miracle. After a long time, Shi Yang suddenly woke up. The cracks on his soul altar had closed a long time ago. Today, his 3 powers Upanishads were complete, but he still needed a little more to enter incipient God realm. Cultivating in Grace Mainland for years had given him a deeper level of knowledge of the death and life power Upanishad. He had advanced this combined power Upanishad, which gave him the chance to break through to the next realm. However, to break through to incipient God realm, he needed abundant earth and heaven energy to make his ethereal extent evolve to the incipient extent. He left the demon area. After a flash, he arrived at the center of Grace Mainland and entered the chasm battlefield that he had escaped that year. He went there and went deep underground. Tens of thousands of miles underground, Shi Yang's co-soul and the Genesis fruit had been fusing inside a massive crystal. That crystal contained lethal earth and heaven formations that were naturally built with invincible power. If it were someone else intruding the place, even if he was at the immortal realm, he wouldn't be able to endure the attack from those formations that were created by Grace Mainland's origin. Unless the ancient continent was destroyed, those lethal death traps and formations were never going to vanish. However, Shi Yang could move freely underground and go deeper into the earth core to reach the crystal that contained the co-soul. In other words, because his soul had fused with Grace Mainland, he was Grace Mainland. Each leaf of grass, river, and mountain on this continent was part of his co-soul. Descended by the crystal, Shi Yang sat down cross-legged. The soul altar emerged from his head, his host soul dancing restlessly. The brilliant, galaxy-like ethereal extent opened little by little and then covered his soul altar. The co-soul inside the crystal was like a dancing flame. It had the same aura as the host soul. However, It had the impression of something very ancient and experienced. Shi Yang's ethereal extent had many stars twinkling in the sky. The suns and moons appeared all together. It had light and life as if it was a real world. Shi Yang drew the aura from the Genesis fruit and took it to quench his body and clean his veins and soul altar. It changed his ethereal extent accordingly. Then, his pulse changed as he suddenly understood something. When he condensed the earth and heaven energy to finish his transformation, he had a magical feeling that he could move Grace Mainland as he pleased. It would be like Desolate, the ancient continent that never stopped moving. As soon as this thought popped up in his head, he tried to think about moving the entire planet. Amazingly, Grace Mainland began to move. Shi Yang was astounded. This ancient continent was drifting in the dark universe at a stable and fast speed. Shi Yang was absorbed in this marvelous experience. The host soul in his soul altar and the co-soul in the crystal glowed marvelously. They transmitted a soul energy fluctuation that matched with the ancient continent. Their energy had a mysterious power that seemed to be able to change the ancient continent. Grace Mainland was in a very remote area in the universe that was far away from other star areas, as if it was abandoned there. And it happened that way. The heavenly monster tribe used to suffer terrible defeats. To prevent their race from coming to an end when others attacked their ancestral star, the ancestors of Heavenly Monster Tribe had moved Grace Mainland away at any cost. They had sealed the star and delivered it to a desolate area. There was no other life star or warrior lived in this area. Thus, no one was going to rediscover it here. And today, Grace Mainland in this dark and isolate area began to move. A magical space energy arose from inside the planet and entered the clouds of the atmosphere. Right after that, a massive space crack opened. That space crack was like a massive mouth with many brilliant outer space streamers and the endless dangers. Grace Mainland flew into the space crack and soared like a shuttle through spaces, heading to an unknown destination. All of a sudden, ordinary humans and warriors living on Grace Mainland recognized a terrifying phenomenon. The sky didn't have the sun, moon, and stars anymore. The entire world became dark. From time to time, they saw meteors shoot over their heads, flash, and then disappear with formidable energy. Each ordinary human living on Grace Mainland recognized the danger. This change of earth and heaven had terrified them. The warriors were also aghast. However, they found out that the earth and heaven energy on Grace Mainland didn't decrease due to this phenomenon. Quite the contrary, the earth and heaven energy on this continent was still increasing. It became thicker day by day that made the warriors jump up and cheer in joy to give thanks for the favor from the sky. However, the world was now dimly lit as the sun, moon, and stars had disappeared. They still felt worried. Fear hung above their heads. They couldn't ease their minds even when they were cultivating. The leaders of many clans gathered and discussed. They wanted to know what was happening to this planet. Unfortunately, no one could tell what was going on. Monster Dragon Star. Azure Dragon and the 4 monsters had left. Ghost Hunter was now lying in the valley in his true form. He still had many lightning beams moving on his body. As time ticked by, the lightning crawling on his body disappeared slowly. Ghost Hunter didn't change his position and was still trying to refine the blood that he had just received. He felt stronger after every second. He didn't know Azure Dragon. He only knew that Azure Dragon had applied the blood sacrifice of Heavenly Monster Tribe on him, which had boosted him from level 12 to the early phase of level 13. He was now as strong as a first sky of incipient God realm. All of this was because of the blood he had received, the 5 drops of blood. He had received the inheritance of the Heavenly Monster mountain range, so he knew what the blood sacrifice was. He also knew that man was a precursor of Heavenly Monster Tribe. He was struck by awe. Because the Heavenly Monster Tribe of the Monster Clan was born in the immemorial time, Azure Dragon must have lived for 100,000 years or even longer. Ghost Hunter admired Azure Dragon a lot since he was an ancient figure that had lived for so long. He wondered how strong Azure Dragon was. As the 5 drops of blood had merged into his body entirely, his monster body became much stronger. He knew that the ancestor of Heavenly Monster Tribe cared about him. He didn't know why this opportunity came to him, but he knew he should grip it tightly and make himself stronger. At a corner of Monster Dragonstar, Kang Yun's round face showed that he was upset. He looked at an elder and asked, "Elder Tian Yin, why has the Holy Ancestor not carried out the blood sacrifice for me?" Tian Yin had a close relation to Kang Yun. Kang Yun saw Azure Dragon disappear with the 4 elders, but only the 4 elders came back and stayed in Monster Dragonstar. Azure Dragon didn't reappear. Kang Yun found it suspicious. Well, Holy Ancestor has just woken up. I think his power hasn't recovered yet. After he gets better, of course, he will carry out the blood sacrifice for you. Tian Yin wore a heavy face and begrudgingly told lies. He knew Kang Yun's characteristics, so he was afraid that Kang Yun would have his mentality distorted when he knew the truth, which would make him do something harmful to the tribe. Thus, he had to conceal this. Elder Tian Yin, your power seems to have decreased a lot too. What happened when you guys left with Holy Ancestor lately? Kang Yun was a little sensitive. Holy Ancestor didn't have enough power, so we had to use the secret technique of our tribe to create a formation to boost him up with some power from us, Tian Yin sighed discreetly. Kang Yun frowned, nodded skeptically, but he didn't pry furthermore. However, he had a knot in his heart. Devil Bloodstar. Zhuoshe was cultivating in the Zhuo family's manor in Divine Land City. She was making quick progress. Surprisingly, she had almost reached second sky of ethereal god realm now. Today, she was still cultivating earnestly that she had almost forgotten herself. Azure Dragon, the heavenly monster tribe's holy ancestor, suddenly appeared in the chamber where she was cultivating. It was like a shadow turning into something real. Zhuoshe was cultivating, so she didn't recognize Azure Dragon's appearance. She was immersed in her magical realm. Deep in Azure Dragon's eyes were his old memory. He eyed Zhuoshe, his face loving. He thought, I can't believe this little girl has the blood of the black tortoise. She's the descendant of the black tortoise. Haha, he finally has a successor. It's too bad that she has the human body. Should I trigger the power of her blood so she will become a real member of our heavenly monster tribe? He kept silent, thinking and hesitating. Zhuoshe's case and Shi Yang's case were similar. They had human bodies with immortal demon blood and heavenly monster blood. On the day Shi Yang had completed his blood replacement, he had officially become the immortal demon warrior. The blood running in his veins was all immortal demon blood. However, the immortal demon warriors were like human warriors. They used the soul altar to cultivate, which was different from monster warriors who had only the monster soul and cultivated their monster bodies to level up. Shi Yang and Zhuoshe were different from each other because of this feature. Azure Dragon was hesitant because he wasn't sure if he would break Zhuoshe's soul altar after he had triggered the black tortoise's blood in her body. It would affect her realm and cultivation base terribly. And now, although Zhuoshe couldn't create the monster body, she had the power and the blood from Black Tortoise that had cleared all obstacles and the bottleneck in her cultivating progress. She could almost increase her power unlimitedly. She could be deemed the hybrid between Heavenly Monster Tribe and the human clan. Just like Ghost Hunter, she was a different race. Azure Dragon found her when his soul covered the surrounding stars. He was astounded. First, he found Ghost Hunter, a member of his new race. Then, he found Zhuoshe, the warrior who had the Black Tortoise's inheritance, but she hadn't had a monster body yet. She still used her human body. Azure Dragon thought that the mighty heaven had really cared about the heavenly monster tribe as he continuously got surprised. He was so happy to see his clan thriving after he had woken up. Nah, I'll just try. Let's see what God wants. He pondered for a long time and then decided to trigger the black tortoise's blood in Zhuoshe's body. He wanted to see the miracle that God had given his clan. Azure Dragon opened his mouth to spurt out a blue lightning ball. It then covered Zhuoshe's body and emitted lightning bolts to stimulate the black tortoise's blood in her body. Azure Dragon became weaker one more time. He paled and forced a smile. Half a month later, the human blood in Zhuoshe's body was gone. It was replaced by the black tortoise's blood. Zhuoshe had entered second sky of ethereal god realm instantly. When the black tortoise's blood filled her body, A strange tortoise shell appeared on her back after a bizarre explosion. Now, she had the aura of the primal, chaotic time of the world, which had rocketed her overall power. She still had a human body, but the blood chi and power in her god body were similar to the heavenly monster tribes. Her soul altar wasn't broken. It had a marvelous change instead. Her host soul had turned into a monster soul. Chapter 1228, Chaos Appears. Chapter 1228, Chaos Appears. Ancient God Star Area. This star area was the God Clan's base star area. It was extremely vast with tens of thousands of life stars, mineral stars, solar stars, and moon stars. The God Clan had bases around those stars. Ancient God Star Area had 7 sea territories that were similar to the sea territory of Fantasy Mist Star Area. They had many space passages. The 7 sea territories were situated in 7 directions of Ancient God Star Area. Each sea territory had many life stars up to 10. Those life stars had many battleships of the God Clan on standby. Also, war chariots and battleships continuously moved in and out of the space passages. The 7 sea territories of Ancient God Star Area were the liveliest areas of the entire universe. Every time the God Clan invaded a star area and turned it into its backyard, it seized a lot of materials and transported them back to Ancient God Star Area through those passages. The materials were transported to Ancient God Star Area every year. The God Clan categorized them so the big families could take them and create pellets and weapons. It made each family of the God Clan extremely rich, and even distant children of the family could be fully equipped. The 7 sea territories connected to dozens of star areas. Most of them were the God Clan's vassals where they had invaded before. The God Clan had built bases in those star areas too. They had subdued the warriors of each star area and made them committed and loyal. They stayed there to supervise the transportation of precious materials like divine crystals from that star area to Ancient God Star Area. However, when the God Warriors came back from the 7 sea territories, they didn't bring a lot of materials. They only brought sharp and lethal weapons. The God Warriors based in dozens of star areas were summoned back to their families through the sea territories. They stayed and adjusted their formation in the sea territories, meeting with the leaders of their families. Countless battleships were gathering in the sea territories. A massive battle was about to sweep through the entire cosmos. While many God Warriors were resting and accumulating power in the sea territories, they found some flows of formidable soul energy move through the sea territories and head to their ancestral star, Ancient God Continent. In a sea territory where many God Clansmen were partying before preparing for the Great War, they suddenly quieted down, exchanged looks, and watched the sky in fear. Then, they saw a meteor shooting out of a space passage, sparking flames along the way. Inside the meteor, they saw a dormant man. With intimidating energy, he flew directly to Ancient God Continent. "Elder Spark is back," screamed a God Warrior in awe. He then wore a respectful face and kneeled down to bow to the meteor. Many God Warriors stopped drinking and partying. They kneeled down to show their respect to the vague figure inside the meteor. I didn't expect that Elder Spark was still healthy. The last time he showed himself was 3,000 years ago. At that time, he was at peak of incipient God realm. It has been so long that my family didn't get any news from him. We thought that he had fallen a long time ago. No one ever thought that he would come back now. Oh, if he shows up, it seems like the Elder Committee considers this war crucial. Yeah, it has been 10,000 years. It's normal that they re-challenge us. Anyway, we'll be the winners in the end. Of course, in this vast sea of stars, which clan or star area can defeat us? Currently, our clan's power has surpassed the bloodthirsty forces 10,000 years ago. Even God can't break the eternal prosperity of our clan. All the warriors of the God clan were full of confidence. It was the pride they had accumulated for 10,000 years. Throughout the recent 10,000 years, the God Clan had won almost all of the battles they had fought. Every star area they had passed had become their territory. They had been the winners for too long that they instinctively thought that they would not lose. The God Zenith on Ancient God Continent. A flaming meteor fell grumblingly on the ground. It looked like a smoking and flaming coffin. However, it was so cold. A member of the god clan who looked exhausted and senile with a pair of bright eyes was standing by the door of the shrine. He was watching the falling meteor. Inside that cold meteor was a sleeping old man. Then, his brows twitched. Slowly, he woke up and opened his mouth to suck the air. The meteor shrank into a small cold rock that fell into his mouth. The old man swallowed it and magically, his energy was boosted. He then looked at his old friends waiting at the door of the ancient god shrine. "Spark, it has been 3,000 years. I didn't think that you were still alive." An old god warrior sobbed. "Feng Ju, you're still healthy. Of course, I can't die that early." Spark gazed at him and then murmured, "Are we all here yet? Can we start the meeting now?" "As you arrived, we're all here." Feng Ju smiled and then stepped into the ancient god shrine. Spark snorted and stepped into the ancient god shrine. Inside the shrine, many senile god warriors were sitting. They all looked 1 foot away from the grave. However, strangely enough, the vitality was abundant in this hall. If someone could use the soul consciousness to sense, he would have found an earth-shaking life magnetic field here. "Spark is here. We can start now," said Feng Ju. After 3 days, the god clan's fleet that had been anchored in the 7 sea territories for a long time started to move like dragons flying. They all began to go to the space passage. Hollow Fearsome Star area, the GU God Sect's territory. Today, in the far west of Hollow Fearsome Star area, a space passage was forcefully torn. Dozens of battleships from the god clan quietly emerged. As soon as they arrived, the god clan's battleships scattered and started to slaughter in Hollow Fearsome Star area. They showed no mercy and killed all warriors on the life stars standing in their way. However, they spared the ordinary humans. They swaggered like a sharp knife and killed all things related to the GU God Sect and Hollow Fearsome Star area. They madly invaded and destroyed Hollow Fearsome Star area. They had terrified the GU God Sect. The sect then had to send out all of their elite forces to battle against the God Clan. The same thing happened to Prosaic Star area, Sirius Star area, Black River Star area, and Earth Eye Star area. All the forces that had joined the battle in Agate Star area were invaded by the God Clan in a large-scale attack. The 12 families of the God Clan had launched their revenge attack at the same time. They had even summoned warriors based in the other star areas. They wanted to bath those star areas in blood to show them the price of trespassing the God Clan's prestige. Creatures had to live in misery at every corner of the vast universe. The Earth-clearing war had started at the same time in the major star areas. The GU God Sect, the Jiao family, and the Wu family felt a tremendous pressure that they had never had before. Finally, they knew how the God Clan could rule their star area and other star areas for 10,000 years. Hollow Fearsome Star area had several hundred life stars with around 100 billion ordinary civilians, around 10 million warriors, of which there were dozens of thousands of King God Realm warriors, several hundred ethereal God Realm warriors, and not more than 20 incipient God Realm experts. Their situation was similar to any other high-level star areas. The God Clan's force invading Hollow Fearsome Star area consisted of around 10,000 warriors. However, they had defeated the GU God Sect continuously. The God Clan had overwhelming advantages in battleships, individual fighting competence, the powers Upanishad, and the number of experts. Each warrior of the God Clan had powerful armor and weapons in addition to high-grade pellets and medicines. Each member of the God Clan had at least one or more divine secret treasure. Although they were at level 1 or 2 divine grade, they were so powerful. At the same time, the GU God Sect's disciples at King God Realm had only sacred grade weapons and not many of them had more than one item. The GU God Sect couldn't compete with others in terms of weapons, pellets, or armor. They were in a dangerous situation. As the God Warriors were experiencing blood battles, they had a lot of strategies and plans. At the same time, although they had just 10,000 warriors, they had several hundred ethereal God Realm warriors with exquisite powers Upanishads. After 10,000 years of accumulation, the God Clan had overwhelmed other star areas completely in terms of power Upanishad, secret weapons, armor, pellets, and fighting experiences. Hollow Fearsome Star area, Prosaic Star Area, and Sirius Star Area were defeated badly. Under the fierce attack of the God Clan, they had lost many warriors. Some star areas even had a worse situation than Agate Star Area before. The general picture of the universe had spread to every corner. The forces that had different plans immediately disregarded the thought of turning their back to the God Clan. The forces that depended on the God Clan became quieter than usual. They had asked their subordinates to stay within their star area. As soon as the God Clan had shown their fangs, the entire universe was shaken and people were frightened. God-blessed Star Area. This area was the territory of the Imperial Dark Tribe. Throughout the 10,000 years, this place was one of the few places that the God Clan didn't disturb. It was still the same at the current time. Although the God Clan was explicitly invading the major star areas now, their battleships hadn't reached this area. It seemed like they were following some tacit agreement. There were a group of imposingly majestic palaces built in a valley filled with divine crystals in the God-blessed mainland, the ancestral star of Imperial Dark Tribe. Those palaces were built between mountains and rivers that were like massive, complex formations. Surrounding the palaces were many chasms leading directly to the underground. The gorges fumed out thick and pure dark chi, which the Imperial Dark Tribe used to feed their souls and bodies. Standing inside one of those chasms was a sacrificial platform built of white bones. This sacrificial platform was octagonal with 8 stone pillars where countless evil souls from the underworld were winding and wailing. Audrey sat neatly on the platform, her lips parted to take in the beams of pure energy from the evil souls, which would then benefit her soul. As the 8 pillars had billions of evil souls, even if each beam of soul energy from them was feeble, taking the energy from a massive number of souls was still thrilling. Sitting by the sacrificial platform was a glamorous woman. She and Audrey looked very alike. Apparently, they had a bloodline connection. Today, she suddenly opened her eyes to look at the sky. A bolt of lightning flashed by the horizon of the God-blessed mainland. That bolt fell directly to her area. A man walked out of the bolt. He looked peculiarly thin and archaic, but he had a pair of crimson eyes. He stood by the edge of the chasm. He smiled, flashed, and then reappeared by Audrey's sacrificial platform. The gorgeous woman coldly looked at him and then snorted, "Well, it's rare to see the chief of the death force of the bloodthirsty force visiting our Imperial Dark Tribe. Xian He, you swaggered into this area that year. Everywhere you went, blood streamed into the river, life stars turned into dead stars. Do you want to bring death to our Imperial Dark Tribe this time? It has been so many years and you still hate me." Xian He rubbed his nose and smiled evilly. "We used to have romantic times, didn't we? I didn't hate you even when you joined the God Clan to kill my force. Why are you still sulky?" The woman gave a faint smile. "I had begged you to help the Imperial Dark Tribe. Who turned me down? Nah, we're not going to talk about the old story." Xian He waved his hand, his crimson eyes sparkling magically. "Adele, I'm here today to talk to your brother. I want to meet him." Chapter 1229, Return with a Whole Life Star. Chapter 1229, Return with a Whole Life Star. The Imperial Dark Tribe's holy land in God-blessed mainland. At the bottom of a deep chasm, Xian He talked calmly. "Adele, I'm here today to meet your brother." Adele's beautiful eyes had a mocking gleam as she sneered. "Well, then you came to the wrong place." After Bloodthirsty had enticed him, he agreed to give up the chief of the Imperial Dark Tribe position to leave with him. Afterward, he stopped being a member of our Imperial Dark Tribe. He hasn't returned to Imperial Dark Tribe yet. He didn't even send me a message. "I'm not going to buy that," smiled Xian He. Adele put on a cold face and said indignantly, "He's the leader of your soul control force. You can't contact him and you're here to ask to see him? Ridiculous. I've used our own method to contact him, but I couldn't find him. The ones I've met recently are all his clones. I want to meet the real version of him." Xian He was persistent. "I'm sorry I can't help you," replied Adele coldly. Xian He just laughed, but he seemed to not want to hang on this. He knew that Adele and the Soul Control Chief had a subtle connection. He thought that Adele would definitely notify him and that bastard should know why Xian He had come to find him. The God Clan is attacking all the major star areas forcefully. What do you think about this? Xianhe rubbed his chin, and said with an evil influence, you and the God Clan had walked the same path that year. Do you want to bind to them this time too? Adele's bold brow furrowed as she sank in her thoughts. She didn't answer him. The God Clan is no longer the God Clan that year. That year, God Clan had united the forces everywhere to strike down our bloodthirsty force. After they defeated us, the God Clan didn't keep the agreement to share the universe with you guys. They have been the overlords. This time, will you repeat your deed? Xianhe said with a dark face. If your bloodthirsty force had restrained your force, you wouldn't have fallen into this situation. You reaped what you sowed. Adele smiled faintly. Pondering for a while, she said, our Imperial Dark Tribe won't participate in the competition between you guys. I hope you would burn the jade and common stone altogether. Ha ha ha. Xianhe laughed, his face happy. Excellent. It's the best if your Imperial Dark Tribe won't interfere with us. Pausing for a while, he continued, I got a gift for your daughter this time. When he finished, he touched the void. The dark clouds started to gather and cover the thousands of miles around. Screeching and wailing noises came out from the dark clouds. Shortly after, dozens of thousands of evil souls arose from the clouds. Adele's bright eyes had a five-colored divine light. She was shocked, indeed. Those evil souls were at original God realm or ethereal God realm. 10 of them were 100 jong tall. They looked like 10 mountains with ferocious auras. Those 10 souls were the host souls of incipient God realm expert. Xianhe pointed at Audrey and smiled. My niece is going to break through to the incipient God realm, so I gave her this gift. Dozens of thousands of evil souls screeched and cried. They rolled together with the dark cloud to Audrey. However, they were bound by an invisible force. They wailed and struggled pitifully to get rid of the restraint. The 10 souls of the incipient God realm experts released ear-piercing shouts that were full of humiliation and unwillingness. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't get rid of Xianhe's bind. In the next second, they turned into grey shadows and entered the chaotic ethereal extent above Audrey's head. The savage screeching and wailing arose from Audrey's body as if billions of angry creatures shouting and cursing the sky. A flow of intent domain was created by evil resentment that could erase all kinds of soul. Audrey's exquisite face reddened. She glowed in health even though she still looked cold and the vitality on her body was feeble. After the ethereal extent above her head was added with dozens of thousands of evil souls, it slowly became a real matter. Adele eyed her daughter, her face wearing perceptible happiness. However, she was still stiff and cold as usual. Xianhe, it has been 10,000 years and you finally did something a human should do. Ha ha ha. Xianhe laughed and turned into a bolt of lightning that entered the dark cloud. His voice came from the cloud. Tell your brother that our master's successor is about to enter Agate Star area. As the Soul Control Chief, he will know what to do. Adele just snorted and didn't say anything. Shadow ghostly prison. The sealed space passages like shining lines floated in between many space cracks. The void in this area looked like a strange mirror that had many fine cracks. After the Ascot's invasion, this area was temporarily abandoned. There was no creature or warrior cultivating here. This place was also the sea territory of Agate Star area. The sea territory was the entrance to a star area. Whenever a star area was formed, the sea territory was slowly but magically formed too. It was like a masterpiece of God to help many star areas connect to each other. The thick barriers stood between the star areas to separate them. Just like Agate Star area, Fiery Star area and Fantasy Mist Star area, although they were adjacent, they couldn't visit each other because of the natural space barriers. There were star areas without barriers, but they were too far from each other. Even successful experts with space power Upanishad needed a long time, like dozens of years or even hundreds of years, to travel through such a long distance. Thus, when people from different star areas wanted to contact each other, they had to use some other methods. The sea territory was the best method. It was the natural area that the mighty heaven had gifted each star area. Each of the space passages was a space teleport formation that nature had created, which could allow someone to cross billions of miles in just a blink of an eye. Shadow Ghostly Prison was the sea territory of Agate Star Area. Today, a massive, chaotic space crack suddenly ballooned. After dozens of seconds, that space crack had enlarged hundreds of times. Then, a dazzling wave of light swarmed over. The space passage couldn't bear such power, so it shattered directly. Countless small pieces shot out everywhere in outer space like meteors. A beautiful life star suddenly emerged from the broken space passage and entered Shadow Ghostly Prison. This life star had the light curtain of natural energy. The arrangement of mountains, lakes, and rivers on this continent was like a lively drawing with strong vitality. That life star wasn't motionless. It continued to drift in Shadow Ghostly Prison and then accelerated. Eventually, it stopped by Fighting Star of the Fighting League. We finally see the sun and moon. Light. Finally, we have light. What happened? Dunno. Many warriors and ordinary civilians were watching the sky, their faces astounded. They seemed to be sealed in a dark world. Without the changes of sun and moon, they didn't know how much time had passed. They only knew that this kind of time passing had made them so worried. They thought that doomsday was coming. Inside the planet, a young man opened his eyes, which had billions of tiny stars twinkling. It looked like he had taken in all the stars in the sky into his eyes. He grinned and mumbled to himself, "I'm finally here." Dash. A corner of Monster Dragon Star. A wave of vibes suddenly expanded in Heavenly Monster Tribe's holy ancestor's heart. His eyes brightened as he laughed. He suddenly flew out of Monster Dragon Star and headed to Shadow Ghostly Prison. He didn't cultivate space power Upanishad, but his speed was a lot faster than the Heavenly Monster Tribe expert who cultivated space power. In a blink, he was able to pass dozens of life stars or billions of miles. When he was traveling to Shadow Ghostly Prison, he didn't know that the one he was looking for had left for Devil Bloodstar already. The marvelous space teleport formation on Devil Bloodstar. The electric beams arose and created a wonder like a heavenly net covering the entire formation. When the fierce energy expanded, a young man emerged from that formation. Some ethereal god realm warriors of the demon clan guarding the formation jerked up in surprise. However, when they wanted to check out the one who had just appeared, they found no aura there. Divine Land City. The Shi family and the Yang family lived in the City Master's building in the center of the city. The members of the Yang and the Shi families stayed and cultivated here. They also had a change and enjoyed power and wealth too. Yang Tian Emperor was cultivating in the chamber hundreds of meters underground. This secret chamber was built of divine crystals and many strange stones that could draw earth and heaven energy. It was filled with energy as the streams of milky white energy floated everywhere like spirit snakes. Yang Tian Emperor was taking in this kind of energy. His brows suddenly arched. He got up and disappeared from the stone chamber. At the east wing of the City Master's building, Shi Jian was teaching his family's juniors including Shi Tian Luo, Shi Tian Xiao, "You brat. You're living in wealth, so you don't cultivate wholeheartedly. Don't you feel ashamed when you face Shi Yang?" Shi Jiao blew his beard and thundered, "Shi Yang has risked his life so you can get what you have today. But little Yang is also a member of the Yang family. Look at the Yangs. Yang Mo has almost reached King God realm. How about you? You're a bunch of lazy rascals. If you continue like this, you will lose our Shi family's pride." Shi Tian Luo, Shi Tian Ku, and Shi Tian Ling had faces that they were supposed to make to a funeral. They sighed and didn't dare to retort. They felt so upset. How could they compare to the Yang family's members? Blood Devil had considered the Yangs as his relatives. He had opened the blood pond for them to cultivate. He had given them so many rare and precious pellets and secret treasures. That was why the Yang family had been enhanced greatly. Their bloodline was already strong. With those favors, how could they compare to them? They had their own objections but no one dared to voice them. Elder Han Feng smiled discreetly while pretending to nod in agreement with the others. Sometimes, he added, "Sigh, we're all human, but why we're so different?" Young Master Yang had his first beam of energy when he was 17 years old. You had a better start and see how far you're left behind now. Well, I'm afraid I shouldn't point it out. Who dares compare with Shi Yang? You. Shi Tianku retorted. Han Feng stepped back and forced a smile. Sigh, as we're talking about him, it has been a long time since we last saw him. As his realm is higher and his position is not ordinary, I'm afraid that he doesn't have free time to talk to his grandfather, Shi Jian said with a lonely face. Well, am I not here? All of a sudden, a clear voice arose when a black shadow appeared in the room. Shi Jian quivered. His old eyes couldn't help but become watery. However, he scolded, "You little devil. So you think your wings are so strong that you don't need this grandfather anymore?" Chapter 1230, Fame. Chapter 1230, Fame. Shi Yang's eyes were bright as he beamed at the people in the room. Shi Jian was still hot-tempered. He was frank, tough, and eager to learn new things. He wasn't satisfied that the Shi family had lower realms than the Yang family. Although he knew it was because of the innate talents, he was still persistent. Despite many failures, he was still very determined. The Shis and the Yangs lived together in the City Master's building. They lived in harmony as if they were actually one body. The Yang family had never compared themselves to the Shi family and they didn't consider the Shis as outsiders. The young generations of the two families were sworn brothers and sisters. Shi Jian and Yang Feng often drank with each other. In conclusion, their relationship was really good. Anyway, Shi Jian just didn't want the juniors to be lazy. Because this area was Agate Star area with many experts. Because this area was Devil Blood Star. It wasn't their homeland. Their vision was widened when they came to Agate Star area. Now, they knew how vast this universe was and how many countless intimidating experts there were. Now, they knew that they were small and weak. Because of Shi Yang's dazzling and outstanding talents, and because Shi Yang was from the Shi family, Shi Jian was never going to let the Shis dirty his fame. Thus, he had always been tough and persistent. He thought that he and the Shi family's younger generation could do better to help Shi Yang in the future. Also, it was because Shi Jian felt that he had become powerless. He didn't want to become a burden or a fragile object to be protected. To this old man with a high self-esteem, it was humiliating that he couldn't help his grandchildren fight and even required their protection. Nah, I always missed Grandpa. When I came back, you were the first one I remembered, Shi Yang hurried to comfort him. Shi Yang knew that Shi Jian was the one who had the biggest influence on him. Yang Tian Emperor couldn't compare to him. When he was with the Shi family, Shi Jian had taken care of him all the time. Although he looked strict, he had carefully protected him. Why did you disappear after that battle? How is your body? Did you get hurt? Shi Jian suddenly remembered that detail, so he arched his brow and asked, "Where did you go?" "I returned to our homeland. I went back to the Merchant Union, Sky Meteor City, and our Shi family." Shi Yang looked absorbed in his memories. Everything in Sky Meteor City is the same. But today, the Shi family is just a legend in that city. Our house is still there under thick layers of dust. He had visited Sky Meteor City and the Shi family's building in the corner of Sky Meteor City. Things hadn't changed much. It was because the legend of the Shi family was still told in that city. The legend of his performance in Sky Meteor City when the Shi family subdued the Beiming family had become the hot topic for the warriors there to discuss. A long, long time ago, the entire Shi family and Zhou family had moved to the Endless Sea and their houses became empty. However, the forces in Sky Meteor City didn't dare to seize the buildings of the Shi and the Zhou families. "You went back to our homeland?" Shi Jian was surprised. Shi Tianluo and Han Feng were so astounded. Homeland. It meant crossing star areas. But their homeland was exhausted now. Although they were nostalgic, no one had thought of returning and cultivating in their own homes. When they left that year, the energy in their homeland was so diluted that it wasn't suitable for them to cultivate anymore. Without rich earth and heaven energy, the mines didn't have divine crystals and the land didn't grow spirit grass and herbs. Without those magical things, the warriors couldn't comprehend their powers deeper. It was the reason they had to leave their homeland. Yeah, I had returned to our homeland. It's time to go home, said Shiyang. Everybody looked baffled. It's different from the time we left. You will understand when you come back home. Shiyang had an affectionate tone in his voice. When they were still in Grace Mainland that year, he absolutely wanted to leave. He had come to Raging Flamestar area with Bao Ao and Jie, struggling to survive. He had risked his life many times just to have a life star so he could deliver his family from the homeland. After that, they could continue to cultivate. Grace Mainland's condition couldn't bother them anymore. The warrior's longevity was related to his realm. If they stayed in Grace Mainland, their realms couldn't break through quickly, so one day, they would have naturally died. Mu Yu Dai was in this situation. Since her realm was stuck, her longevity was limited. Although she had energy in her body, her life magnetic field was slowly drained and she was getting weaker. Eventually, she had to return to nothingness. Every time a warrior broke through to the new realm, besides the transformation of his body, his soul and life magnetic field would enhance altogether. Only continuous breakthroughs gave them eternal youth and allowed them to maintain their life magnetic fields. Shiyang had experienced all kinds of hardship to move his families to Agate Star area and build Divine Land City in Devil Bloodstar so they could have new homes and cultivate. But from today, everything was about to come to the starting point one more time. He wanted to bring his families back to Grace Mainland. Thinking about all the things that had happened, Shiyang thought it was a dream. Shi Jian, Han Feng, and the others were filled with surprise. They didn't know what he meant, so they tried to find hints from his face. Finally, you're back. Blood Devil's voice came from outside. Shiyang couldn't hear many people breathing. They didn't know for how long the experts on Devil Bloodstar had gathered here. Shiyang chuckled and said to Shi Jian, we should go out to talk. Many people were in the City Master's building of Divine Land City. Blood Devil, Fu Wei, Feng Han, Lin Xin, Yang Tian Emperor, Leona, Fei Lan, Ka Tuor, Xia Xinyang, Zi Yaro, and others had packed the place and were looking at him. Shi Yang didn't conceal his aura when he got back through the teleport formation by the blood pond. Naturally, his whereabouts were reported. Shadows gathered in the place. They had different expressions. Some looked happy and some looked thrilled. They looked at Shi Yang as he was the only character here. Oh yes, I'm back, Shi Yang beamed. Although the danger in Agate Star area had been temporarily avoided, many forces still stayed on this planet. Some forces had left, the forces that didn't belong to the Potion and Tool Pavilions Union. Feng Han, Lin Xin, and their forces that had a close relationship decided to stay in Devil Bloodstar for the time being. They wanted to observe further. After they could confirm the situation of the universe, they were going to leave. The God Clan had terrified them. Yang Kai, Jingyu Wan, and the other clans and forces had left Devil Bloodstar, but they didn't dare to stay far away. They decided to stay on the life stars close to Devil Bloodstar. They maintained the connection with Devil Bloodstar to counter the surprising danger. Congratulations, Fu Wei said gently. Congratulations. Congratulations. Feng Han, Lin Xin, and many other experts congratulated him, their faces joyful and thrilled. Xia Xinyang, Zi Yaro, and Feng Areo were there too. They beamed and touched people's hearts. Their beautiful eyes had different meanings. When Shiyang had entered Divine Land City, many warriors were shocked because of the surging blood qi and energy in his body. They had reached an incredible level. People understood that he had advanced further in his realm. Now, he had entered a whole new world, incipient God realm. It was true. Grace Mainland had drifted through the space slits for a long time to arrive in Agate Star area. During that time, Shiyang's soul altar had sublimated and his ethereal extent had upgraded to the incipient extent. He had reached first sky of incipient God realm and became a new star in this vast sea of stars. No one could overwhelm his light. I want to move Divine Land City to Grace Mainland. This time. I've brought the ancient continent here, Shiyang turned to Blood Devil. Blood Devil was shocked. He couldn't believe that. He studied Shiyang and then nodded slowly. He was one of a few people who knew the secret of the ancient continent. Even Fu Wei, Feng Han, and Lin Xin didn't know that. Yang Tian Emperor was the only one Shi Yang had told the ancient continent's secret. Bringing the entire ancient continent and crossing many star areas to reach here, how big was this megastructure? Blood Devil took a deep breath to calm down. Great-grandpa, Grandpa, please ask the people in the city to leave for a while. This city should be relocated to Grace Mainland, requested Shi Yang. Yang Tian Emperor and Shi Jian couldn't hide the thrill in their eyes. They studied Shi Yang with complicated looks for a while and then flew away to spread out the order. Nah, you don't need to do such laborious work. Blood Devil screamed and then spurt out a bloodlight. That bloodlight then condensed in the sky of the Divine Land City and turned it into a giant phantom. That phantom towered the entire city. It had an intimidating energy fluctuation too. The phantom then thundered, its voice reverberating. All citizens in the Divine Land should move out of the city for a while. Shi Yang wants to arrange a massive formation. Please cooperate with him. Hearing the name Shi Yang, screaming and cheering arose from each corner of Divine Land City. The residents of the city got out of their cultivating places, flooding the streets and shouting excitedly. This name was an immortal legend in Divine Land City. The people living in Divine Land City came from the clans and races from Grace Mainland, including the Cow family, the Three God sect, the Yin and Yang Wonderland, the Corpse God sect of the Endless Sea, the Radiant God cult of Divine Great Land, the members of the Human Clan, Monster Clan, and Dark Clan from the Perpetual Night Forest. Some of those clans used to have conflicts and resentment against Shi Yang. However, when Grace Mainland was running out of Earth and Heaven energy, and when they were the most desperate, Shi Yang appeared. He had brought them through countless star areas to reach this place. It was the grace that people had carved in their hearts. They never forgot his favor to them. In Divine Land City, the name Shi Yang was legendary. He was a legend that everybody respected. Thus, hearing that Shi Yang had returned to Divine Land City and wanted to use the city to arrange a formation, people were willing to help him. They urged their subordinates to leave the city. No one felt discontented. Shi Yang's soul consciousness raked through the city. He could sense the life energy leaving the city orderly. They were chanting his name too. Shi Yang felt warm inwardly. He suddenly recognized that his years of effort weren't wasted. Chapter 1231, Mega Work. Chapter 1231, Mega Work. It didn't take a long time to clear Divine Land City. Each resident of Divine Land City was a warrior with a relatively high realm in Grace Mainland because only those warriors were qualified to live in Devil Bloodstar. They had cultivated ascetically for many years in Devil Bloodstar, so their realms all upgraded. The warriors didn't need a long time to move out of the city. Several hours later, the entire Divine Land City was empty. Several million residents of Divine Land City were now gathering 1,000 meters away from the city. All of them were warriors from Grace Mainland with high realms. Currently, they were watching Divine Land City and discussing boisterously. What does Shi Yang want to do? He wants to prepare more formations to protect Divine Land City. Outside the city, Cao Qiu Dao was focused, his face suspicious. Maybe, that kid is now a towering giant. His surprised people a lot. Fan Xiong-yun of the Yin-Yang Wonderland wore a sad face. She stooped and shook her head. She then looked at the woman standing next to her. It was Cao Ji-lan. Cao Ji-lan was so upset, her heart twisted with regret and her face sorrowful. She had never thought that Shi Yang, the one she had chased after in the chasm battlefield, could reach his current height. She had self-proclaimed to be smart and keen, but she had kept this regret for the rest of her life. There's a sort of man that if you don't hold on to him when he was weak, you will never get that chance again when he conquers the whole world. Cao Ji-lan lowered her head and sighed. At another corner outside the city, the four cold women were looking at Divine Land City, their hearts filled with sorrow. Standing behind them were beautiful girls of Ice Emperor City. All of them were wearing white dresses, their bodies graceful and cold. Bing Ching Tong's eyes sparkled while she was talking gently. At least, we had a good time with him. It's the best moment of our life. We will remember it, and we know he remembers us. Even though we're small, he remembers us. He has visited us many times and brought us here. Shuang Yuzhu, Han Kui, Ling Danqing had mature makings. Listening to their big sister, the three women could only stoop and sigh. After they had moved to this place, their lives had become better. They had a lot of cultivating materials and their realms were increasing steadily. Their disciples behaved well and the other forces in the city had treated them well. They weren't in a war and they had a lot of materials to cultivate with thick earth and heaven energy. They were living the lives they had always wanted. However, sometimes when they didn't cultivate, they couldn't help but remember the old times. When they were in Isemperor City, a young man had come like a sharp sword that thrust into their hearts. He had brought them to fight others and they had experienced ups and downs. They sometimes thought that if they had a choice, they would be willing to live the same old days of fear. At least, they had him at that time. Recently, they thought about the ideal life where they could have anything they wanted. However, they knew that they lacked one thing. The one thing that never belonged to them. A man like him will never be bound to any woman. No one will have him forever. Bing Ching Tong sighed and continued sadly. We're lucky. We're old stories of his life. We're much luckier than many women. The other three contemplated for a while and then smiled gently. Memories arose in their minds. Whenever they recalled old stories, they looked even prettier. They're all gone. In the City Master's building, Blood Devil retrieved his soul consciousness and confirmed. Fu Wei, Yang Tian Emperor, and Shi Jian also stayed outside the city. The other cities on this planet also focused on Divine Land City as they were so curious. They wanted to see what Shi Yang would do. In the coming 10,000 years, Grace Mainland will become the most suitable area to cultivate in this universe. Not only because of the abundant earth and heaven energy, but the warriors can also touch the truth of power Upanishad. Shi Yang smiled and said to Blood Devil, I will preserve an area for you. You will manage that place the way you want. How does it sound? Blood Devil laughed and nodded to him. Since he knew the magical secrets of the ancient continent and the power of the Genesis fruit, he knew how heavy Shi Yang's words were. In the next 10,000 years, Grace Mainland was going to replace ancient God continent to become the most magical place in this universe. Each square meter of Grace Mainland was going to be as expensive as gold. Many warriors of the other star areas were going to want to cultivate there. It was also the reason why Shuo Jiao and Mo Fu had rushed to rescue Shi Yang when they heard he was in trouble. Later on, each section of Grace Mainland was going to become priceless. Blood Devil knew this, so he didn't pretend to be so polite. He nodded his head immediately. I will bring Divine Land City away, Shi Yang stated while his face was stern. Blood Devil nodded one more time. He didn't talk more and just disappeared from this city after a flash. Shi Yang appeared in the sky above Divine Land City. He sat cross-legged and hovered in between the clouds. The crowds of Divine Land City and Devil Bloodstar were watching him from a distance. They had concentrated, some even forgetting to breathe. Everyone was so excited. They wanted to know what he would do. Suddenly, the intimidating power that shook the entire sky arose. Space cracked. Several 1,000-meter-long sabers appeared in the void like sabers of angels cutting the void. The sky had many cracks where eye-catching lights shot out like thousands of meteors. The void was like a massive, torn open bag. Countless beams of 5-colored light shot out everywhere. The gusts swept through the entire place terrifyingly. The incredibly enormous space crack that covered the Divine Land City slowly pressed down. The horrible pressure like the power of God grumblingly descended from the sky. Many warriors felt a massive hand pressing on their soul altars that they couldn't even wiggle to resist. This kind of intimidation arose deep in their hearts. The higher realm warriors had to bear bigger pressures. Many warriors standing outside Divine Land City screamed and stepped back when they saw the earth-shaking commotion. The shining space sabers that were dozens of thousands of meters long moved around the sky and cutting it. People could see beautiful wonders through those cracks. They saw meteors colliding, shattering, and shooting out billions of pieces. Those small rock pieces could kill even incipient God Realm experts. Many experts at peak of ethereal God Realm or incipient God Realm looked at the meteors colliding inside those space cracks with grimaces. Instinctively, they stepped backward. All of a sudden, the massive sabers in the air had transformed into massive hands that pulled and tore the space crack further. Billions of outer space streamers shot out, covering the entire Divine Land City like membranes. The several thousand square mile Divine Land City was tied and lifted off the ground. In that grumbling commotion like an avalanche, Divine Land City slowly floated up and flew towards the crack that looked like a bag of air. The crowd on the ground was astounded. They looked bewilderedly shocked. To where does he want to move Divine Land City? My God, what kind of power is that? I'm afraid that incipient God Realm experts aren't this powerful. Is it true that only experts with the space power could reach such height? Many warriors were clamoring outside Divine Land City. They dropped their jaws in awe. Uncle Duo, you also cultivate space power Upanishad. What do you think about that? Fu Wei looked at Jia Duo. Feng Han, Lin Xin, and the others who were by her also looked at Jia Duo, expecting a professional comment. Jia Duo shook his head and said, basically, we're different from each other. Before he had reached ethereal God Realm, we were not at the same level. Now, I'm too far behind him. I can't see through his abilities. When we were in Shadow Ghostly Prison, Bello used to confine our space and moved us to another place. If we compare him with Bello, what do you think? Asked Fu Wei. Bello at Second Sky of incipient God Realm had plotted us. He had prepared a different deed to move us to another area. It's not really similar to this. Jia Duo pondered for a while and explained, this time, Shi Yang moves the space here without any preparation beforehand. Moreover, his technique is different from Bello's. Bello had moved our space to another spot within an area. Today, Shi Yang's forcefully using the space crack to move the space containing the entire Divine Land City away. His moving a whole world. You mean, his attainment in space power Upanishad has surpassed Bello's? Feng Han was astounded. Evidently, Jia Duo confirmed. Will it work? Lin Xin wasn't so sure. I don't know, Jia Duo shook his head, but if he dares to do that, he must be sure. I think he's going to succeed. I remember he has never failed. Divine Land City slowly moved and soared out of Devil Bloodstar like a sealed space. While people were gawking, the Divine Land City entered the space bag. After one flash, it disappeared. Divine Land City disappeared into thin air. Everybody couldn't stay calm anymore. They were bewildered and were looking at Shi Yang and the deep hole in the sky. They couldn't think about anything. Citizens of Divine Land City, you guys should use the space teleport formation by the blood pond to leave. It's time to go home. Shi Yang suddenly shouted. Our homeland today is much more suitable for you to cultivate. It's better than Devil Bloodstar. From now on, within 10,000 years, you guys don't need to move anymore. This moving space ability was from Bello's attainment, indeed. However, Bello's power was limited, so he couldn't perform like Shi Yang did today. Thus, what Bello couldn't do at Second Sky of incipient God Realm, Shi Yang had made it work right when he had just entered incipient God Realm. If his realm had been high enough, he could have even brought creatures all together and teleported them to Grace Mainland instantly. It's better to cultivate there than in Devil Bloodstar. Homeland, does it have some earth-shaking changes? Since Shi Yang had come back to Grace Mainland that year, I have a feeling that I'm dreaming all the time. Crossing the star areas to visit Devil Bloodstar, living in another star area, and crossing for something else? You can't cross the same distance to come home. Am I really living in a dream for such a long time? Oh, home sweet home. We've been away from home for a long time. If he said it's different, it ends up binge different. Move. Let's go home. Let's go home. Home sweet home. Chapter 1232, Immortal. Chapter 1232, Immortal. There were beautiful white light halos expanded by the blood pond. Every time the white life flashed, It meant that a group of people had left Devil Bloodstar. Divine Land City's citizens had used the formation to continuously leave under Shi Yang's control. Many people who had participated in his life had finally met him after so many years. He stood by the blood pond. Blood Devil, Fu Wei, Feng Han, Lin Xin, and leaders of the other forces also stood quietly by the formation, their countenances complex. The warriors of the Yang family and the Shi family stood at the end of the line. They didn't take the chance to leave first. Yang Tian Emperor was talking with Blood Devil. They were discussing something interesting. Shortly after, most of the Divine Land City's residents had left. Only the members of the Yang family and the Shi family remained. Yang Tian Emperor looked at Shi Yang. Shi Yang chuckled and then explained, "You guys shouldn't go back to Divine Land City. We're going to Immortal Island. Later on, this sea will have more spiritual qi than Divine Great Land." Yang Tian Emperor and Shi Jian looked moved and joyful. "How about me? Which good land have you preserved for me?" Blood Devil laughed. "Also the Endless Sea," Shi Yang squinted. "Our family will go to the Endless Sea because it will be the most precious land in the continent later." Since he had fused with the ancient continent, he knew that Heavenly Monster Mountain Range in the Endless Sea was the holy land of Heavenly Monster Tribe. That sacred land was really magical as Heavenly Monster experts had changed the world structure there. They had installed many new things. Earlier, Shi Yang had found that the richness level of earth and heaven energy on many islands in the Endless Sea had gradually surpassed the average level in Grace Mainland. Definitely, they would become the most lively and live in the most wealthy areas in the continent. Shi Yang was greedy, so he had to keep the best things for his family. Thus, the Yang family and the Shi family who walked the last are going to continue to be the overlord of the Endless Sea. Fu Wei, Feng Han, and Lin Xin were listening, their faces suspicious. "Shi Yang, isn't Devil Bloodstar good enough? Why must you leave?" Wu Lan had talked for all of them. "If the Devil Bloodstar doesn't have enough energy, why did you have to cross thousands of miles to get here?" The others also looked at him. Leona, Fei Lan, Ka Tuor, Fu Wei, and Zi Yarrow were also curious. The people standing here at this moment had noble statuses or a close relationship with Shi Yang. Thus, they were qualified to know the secret. Shi Yang contemplated for a while. He understood that the ancient continent wasn't a secret in the other star areas. They were going to know it eventually. He didn't need to conceal anymore. "You guys go with me to see with your own eyes." People then had their eyes brighten and they all nodded. Ka Tuor, go to the Giant Clan and ask Shen Jiyu and Na Xin to come to meet me here. The Giant Clan had helped us a lot that year. We shouldn't mistreat them. Precursor Fei Lan, please call Carthew and the others from Raging Flamestar area. Yeah, just the people who are close to us. For example, the pirates from the land of God Punishment should be brought here. We don't need to care about the ones from the Underworld League. Shi Yang pondered and then advised the other. Ka Tuor and Fei Lan went away immediately. Feng Rao's charming face was happy. She was touched. She was a smart woman, so she could guess that the ones who were invited here should have a big chance from Shi Yang. The pirates of the land of God Punishment were under her father's control. As they were gathering in Devil Bloodstar and Shi Yang had asked to bring them here, of course, he had given her face. When Zi Yarrow heard Shi Yang mention Carthew, she smiled, her bright eyes rippling light as she threw him a look. Shortly after, Na Xin and Zhen Jiyu of the Giant Clan came like two mountains. Na Xin had almost reached incipient God Realm, and Zhen Jiyu had entered second sky of ethereal God Realm. Now, their bodies were sparkling with a crystal light like jade with surging, which immediately increased immense blood qi. "Hey Shi Yang, what did you call us for?" "Haha, our Giant Clan is content to live in Devil Bloodstar. We don't want to move," guffawed Na Xin. The Giant Clan was contented to their current life. Devil Bloodstar was rich of earth and heaven energy and it was the base of Demon Clan. It was also one of the strongest areas in Aged Star area. Nobody dared to provoke the strongest clan in Agate Star area. The Giant Clan had a private area in Devil Bloodstar. Currently, their soldiers' realms sharply increased. Na Xin and Jin Jiyu really enjoyed their current lives. Hearing Ka Tuor talking unclearly that Shi Yang wanted to move the giant clan, they weren't so willing. You can decide later, Shi Yang just smiled and gave no explanation beforehand. After a while, Feng Ku, Carthew, and the warriors of Raging Flamestar area arrived. Uncle, Zi Yarrow smiled and called him gently. Carthew bent his body elegantly. Your Highness, you look much better than before. Getting out of Raging Flamestar area was a precise decision. It's our fate that we can come to Agate Star area. He turned to Shi Yang and smiled. You've changed terrifically. Every time I see you, I have to jolt back. Feng Ku and the captains of the pirates in the land of God Punishment looked wary when they came here. Standing in front of Blood Devil, Fu Wei, and Feng Han, the famous warriors of Agate Star area, they bent their bodies slightly as they were tense. Feng Rao then walked to them and said, Father, don't worry. It's a good thing that you're invited here. We're blessed. Feng Ku relaxed, nodded and smiled, looking at Shi Yang. Of course, he knew the relationship between his daughter and Shi Yang. He also knew that Shi Yang had an ambiguous relationship with many women. Sometimes, he didn't feel that it was fair for his daughter. However, most of the time, he was happy because his daughter's choice was made precisely. Because of his daughter's accurate presumption, the vulnerable pirates in the land of God Punishment could move to a high-level star area and live in Devil Blood Star. Compared to Agate Star area's warriors, Raging Flame Star area's warriors were weaker. When they came here, they felt like they were farmers visiting a big metropolis for the first time. They understood that what they got today was because of Shi Yang's concern to Feng Ku's daughter. Okay, we're all here. Let's go. Shi Yang raked through the group and then walked to the formation. People immediately followed him. The dazzling halos flashed when they disappeared. Then, they reappeared on the immortal island in the endless sea. This place had a formation that Shi Yang had created a long time ago. Before he came to Devil Bloodstar, he had fixed it and turned it into a marvelous formation that could cross the border between star areas easily. They were now standing on the formation on the immortal island. Oh! Yang Tian Emperor arched his brows. He cried when he was touched. The members of the Yang family and the Shi family were baffled. That year, when the Dark Clan and the Demon Clan had invaded the Endless Sea, creatures living on islands of the Endless Sea had to live in misery. Mountains had collapsed and the lakes had dried up. When they left the continent that year, everything was barren and dreary. At that time, Grace Mainland hadn't reached the end of its energy cycle, but the earth and heaven energy had already diluted. Today, the immortal island had many strange plants, green mountains, and crystal-clear lakes. They could even see fat shrimps and fish with spirit chi. The valleys were now filled with flowers. They had also found many strange and rare floras that grew only in some areas of Agate Star area. The white wisps of milky mist wound around the islands. Many different kinds of birds were singing, their voices echoing around the mountains. The auspicious clouds hovered in the sky with the hazy mist decorating the island and making it a wonderland somewhere. Blood Devil, Fu Wei, and Feng Han were dumbstruck. Right after that, they released their soul consciousnesses to check around. Shortly after, Feng Han said, "The spirit chi in this area is really abundant and thick. It has many rare grass and plants. Oh, I can sense a divine crystal mine near here. Why, did you guys leave this place that year?" He couldn't understand it. No, it's not true. Na Xin had been to the Endless before. He frowned and then said, "Completely different. This is completely different from the previous time I came here. It's a whole new world. If the earth and heaven energy in that place had been 1/3 of what we have now, how could we have had to leave?" sighed Yang Tian Emperor. After people listened to Na Xin and Yang Tian Emperor, they looked at Shi Yang since they knew that there was some secret behind this scene. As the others were gazing at him, Shi Yang lowered his voice. "Right now, the earth and heaven energy of this area isn't as strong as the energy in Devil Bloodstar. But I'm sure that within 100 years, it will surpass Devil Bloodstar. 1,000 years later, this place will have the thickest earth and heaven energy in the entire universe. It will be an auspicious time for warriors to train their bodies and practice their abilities. Later on, this continent was going to become the wonderland of the cosmos. Listening to him, people changed their visages. All looked shocked. It's true. In the next 10,000 years, this continent will become the cosmic center. A voice came from deep in the sky. However, a man instantly appeared on the immortal island and stood in front of the others. Blood Devil at third sky of incipient god realm was baffled when he saw the man. He shouted in awe. You. What's your realm? Allow me to introduce myself. I was born on this continent in the immemorial epoch. I'm a member of Heavenly Monster Tribe. Azure Dragon smiled and looked at Shiyang. Bloodthirsty Force's successor, we finally met. On behalf of all members of the Heavenly Monster Tribe, I thank you sincerely. Who are you, sir? Shiyang had a turbulent vibe in his heart. In front of this man, he felt so small as if he had to lift his face to look at a high sky. After breaking through to incipient god realm, Shiyang could feel calm even when he faced Blood Devil. However, after this man had shown himself here, he felt deadly dangerous. It was like having the tip of a sharp spear placed on his Adam's apple. He felt so tense in every second. He had never gotten this feeling before. I'm the current chief of Heavenly Monster Tribe. I'm Azure Dragon, smiled the man. Shiyang discolored in fright. He was baffled for a while before he could pull himself together. He took a deep breath and then bowed to the man. Sir, you old man. I didn't know that you were alive until now. I truly am meeting about an archaic monster. Azure Dragon guffawed. I'm sure you will reach immortal realm. Once you enter that realm, you can live as long as I can. Listening to him, Fu Wei, Feng Han, Na Xin, Leona, Lin Xin, and the others were astounded. The immortal realm was a legendary realm. Although Agate Star Area was a high-level star area, they never had a warrior in this realm for the past dozens of thousands of years. This sort of warrior had only existed in rumors and myth. It was an existence that nobody had ever met. Today, they finally saw one. Immortal. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,